All right, since it's just gone on 1 o'clock, I will call the meeting of the Policy and Priorities Committee for February 1st underway. And I'd like to call and see if there's any additions to the agenda. Any added items? I don't see any hands up, so I'll move on then to adoption of the agenda. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. I move that we adopt the agenda for the Policy and Priority meeting for February 1st as presented.
Thank you. All in favor? And that's carried 7-0. We'll move along to the adoption of the previous minutes. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Thompson.
Yes, I would move that we accept the minutes of December 7th Policies and Priority meeting as amended.
And sorry, Councillor Thompson, do you have an amendment then?
The amendment was sent out in our package, and there is a notation there relative to Justin Andrew, and if that can be reflected.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't know if we need to say the amended, but perhaps our legislative clerk, do we need to say as amended, or is it because it's already included in our agenda package? We do? Okay, thank you. All right, I'll call a vote then. It's all in favor of the motion. And that's carried 7-0. Thank you. We'll move along then now to reports. CAO Mayor, would you like to introduce?
Yes, thank you very much. And our first report of the day is with the Olds Fire Department, and we have Chief Andrew who will give us an update on all things that are happening with the fire department. So Chief Andrew.
Thank you, CAO Merritt, your worship and council. Happy to be here to present the fourth quarter statistics for Olds Fire Department and the review of the annual statistics for 2020. On our first page, speaking of the fourth quarter statistics, we look at our urban incidents as being 73 in the fourth quarter. When we look at those numbers, very similar to other quarters, a majority of our incidents were related to no fire alarm activations, so otherwise referred to as false alarms in some cases, which may or may not be the case, but it's essentially little to no action required on our part. In our medical assists category of 20, we did see a fairly drastic increase in those calls in our fourth quarter, and that was due in part to our resumption of our medical co-response and first response program with Alberta Health Services. With some of the restrictions with COVID earlier in the year, our co-response piece fell down to almost non-existent, and in the last part of the year we went back online with that, and so as a result the increase was there. So otherwise, a fairly quiet quarter for us. There were 7 fire incidents recorded in that period of time as well. We did have a little rash of incidents, which I think you recall there kind of in that October area, but nothing out of the ordinary and certainly not worrisome. As far as rural incidents, in the same period, we had 20. Again, the fire were a big part of those, and or motor vehicle collisions. And again, these numbers were lower than typical for the time of year, just due to COVID and the lack of travel would be what we would attribute it to. But for the most part, our numbers stayed fairly consistent through the year. And towards the end of the year in December there, we actually did see an uptake in calls, and we were somewhat suppressed for the majority of the year, and then December kind of caught us back up again. So the way January's gone for us into 2021 would say that we're right close to where we would typically be, COVID or not. So if there's any questions on those numbers or stats, I'd be happy to answer them, or I'll continue. Mayor Muzychka.
Sorry, thank you very much, Fire Chief Andrew. Member Ziska, you have a question?
Well, actually, I didn't. I'll wait till the end of his presentation.
Okay. Would you like to continue with the presentation then, Chief Andrew?
Sure, you bet. So if we look down on the next page, just looking at our averages, just drawing attention to a couple demographics on the shoot time. So our average shoot time in this quarter was 5 minutes and 15 seconds. So you can see the comparison from last year at this time. We've trimmed that time down considerably, which is a fairly substantial improvement. So we're monitoring these, and you know, as we build these documents and this statistic, it'll be better to trend it to see. Quarter to quarter is very tough because the time of year can have an impact on a lot of these, but when we're not comparing it to historical data, it makes it a very narrow window. So we want to broaden that view. Average en route time. So that's travel time when we leave the station to arriving on the incident. It has increased. Now, the explanation for that is that literally the location of the incident could have that impact. So if we're traveling from the far west side of Olds all the way to the east side, again, keeping in mind this is for urban incidents only, it has an effect on that time. And time of day, of course, is a big one as well. So that one I'm not too concerned about because it still hits that 6 minute mark, which is well underneath the 7 or 8 minute mark according to HERF. Average response time would be the amount of time spent dealing with the incident. And so you can see that 12 minutes is that average time. And again, that number is not truly indicative of a major incident. That is where we're averaging in these alarm calls that very little action is required, so we clear up very quickly. Average number of responders at scene. Again, that number is indicative of what the nature of the incidents are. So the fact that we didn't have major incidents would see that number be very low, which is just what we're looking for. And the important one for me is I see the average total number of responders, which is 8.1. And that's a very healthy number for us right now, is that when we're seeing this average number of people responding to each call, it being 8 is that's a pretty good spot. And again, that's not a true reflection of when we have a major incident that we only have 8 people. But when we're talking about these alarm calls and or medical assist calls where only 1 or 2 people actually respond to the actual incident, our members are being judicious in what they respond to, so they know that it's being handled, so they don't come to the hall, and therefore doesn't require us to compensate them for their time. And so again, I'm very happy with those numbers, and it's providing the service that we need. So and if we scroll down further into the comparison, you can just see traditionally where we are with our incidents from last year in 2019. The big one is that we have you know, comparisons that are very similar, and for 2020 we're lower in some cases, and that's simply because, again, we contribute to COVID to the reduction in service requirements just due to the lack of travel and people being at home more. In some cases there are some increases to that, and again, some of that has to do with also when you have more people at home, there's more instances of alarm calls simply because cooking incidents and things like that, carbon monoxide type calls and what have you. So again, not anything really alarming. It's all to be expected with the current circumstances. When we look at the rural incidents in the same page, we do see a substantial difference in numbers. And that is the one thing I think that COVID has done for us, is that our rural response numbers for this year are substantially down from previous. And again, some of that has to do with weather patterns and you know, having a relatively short dry spring period and healthy moisture levels throughout. And again, lack of travel and people out and about doing things attributed to that. So that's the third quarter piece. And so if we were scroll down to the next, to the year end, again, I can ask or take questions if anybody has any on the third quarter first, or if you want me to continue.
No, well, you might as well continue. Yeah.
Sure. So if we look at our total stats for the year, we are reporting 354 total incidents on 2020. And if we look at our urban incidents, that's 246 of those. And again, you see a big majority being the alarm type calls. We had 29 listed fires in 2020. And part of that was that we were dealing with the arsonist early in 2020. And then again, throughout a couple of periods, which account for 5 or 6 calls for fires all in a very short period of time. Again, we keep an eye on that statistic, and no, we don't have a fire issue in Olds at present, but again, those statistics are fairly robust and give us a good indication of what an average year looks like for us. Again, our medical assist calls were down and first response in 2020 simply because of COVID. We would typically see those numbers much higher in a year. So as we come out of COVID, we'll anticipate that we'll get those numbers up in 2021. Looking at the rural incidents, again, that's a fairly even distribution of calls, again, because it's only 108 calls for the year, fairly limited from what we've seen in years past. It's certainly an exception. And again, there's no standouts there of issues that are requiring our attention or immediate action. Then scrolling down to our shoot times or our averages, again, when we're looking at these numbers as a wholesome collection, I do see that in our total statistics that our average shoot time was 3 minutes and 37 seconds in comparison of 5 minutes. And that is, that's remarkable for paid on-call fire service. And before I take a bounding amount of credit for that, we do have to realize that because so many people were working from home, that definitely had an impact on our response demographics. So we typically had faster response and more responders than what we might have if COVID wasn't in place. That being said, I think that as the world progresses and as we come out of COVID and we learn the benefits of working from home and flexible work scheduling and locations, we may benefit from this long term because our workforce may start doing this on a more regular basis. So that is a win for us. And I can certainly speak to the fact that a 3 minute and 37 second response time, and that's averaged out for all calls, not just the major ones, is a pretty responsible and respectful service provided. So that's a great piece. Average en route time, again, this is all the travel piece. And so that 8 minute and 44 second is fairly close to what it was previously. And again, this is averaging out for the furthest reaches of our response territory as well as the closest. So I think that's pretty reasonable. Response time of 40 minutes. Now that's where that number jumps up, and that attributes all the incidents that we had where we actually had major response, such as fires or motor vehicle collisions. So that's more in line with what we'd expect on those type of calls that we're spending approximately an hour to deal with them. Again, response people at scene at 8.45, and that number staying very consistent, which is indicative of what we actually do or what we need to complete the job. And again, our average number of responders is 11, so that's slightly higher than it was in 2019. And so that's a good healthy number as well, as that mentioned before that we're looking at that 8 number, and 11 is even better yet. So again, that's partially attributed to COVID and working from home, but there's definitely no red flags there for me as far as our service demographics and our abilities. And when we scroll and look at the comparison from year previous on the urban and rural charts, again, this the total year in comparison to the fourth quarter are very similar. That, like I say, we saw small differences in some categories, but where we saw the biggest difference was our rural incidents were down substantially, and again attributed to lack of travel and or people, camping and doing all sorts of those kind of things. So we hope, not for the sake of making our demographics look different, but we hope for the sake of everybody's well-being that 2021 sees a resumption of those outdoor activities and things like that. So that's all I have as far as statistics. So I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Fire Chief Andrew. Mayor Maszewska. You're on mute, Mr.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Would you like me to start with a motion?
That would be great. Thank you.
Excellent. I'd like to accept the Olds Fire Department fourth quarter for 2020 and year-end 2020 statistics for information. And my question actually just turned into a comment because I let you finish, Chief. My question was going to be on that shoot time. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, 5 minutes and 15 seconds is excellent for a paid on call our size. And the explanation of the COVID to get down to 3:37, that's incredible service that we're offering to Olds and surrounding communities. So congratulations on that, and great work. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Blatz, you were next. Nope. Okay. Councillor Harper.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Through you to Fire Chief Andrew. In reference to the average shoot times, those charts, this is total urban and rural. And I don't want yourself or your clerks at the fire hall to go through any additional work, but how hard would it be to break that down between urban and rural?
So I'm glad you asked, and it will not be very much work at all in the future. We are literally at the 11th and a half hour on the changeover to our new records management software, where all of this statistical demographics will be literally at the push of a button without any legwork, where this current model that you're seeing takes Melanie several hours to extract and compile. And so we are very eagerly anticipating that swap over here shortly. And we will definitely have it broken down specifically to urban and rural. And we'll even be able to extract further data on the type of call. So you can see where the major incident response times are versus the lesser, because that tells a different story even as well as far as involvement and or response when it's truly needed.
Further to just supplement to that.
Go ahead, Councillor Harper. I don't see anybody else's hands up.
Okay, thank you very much. I do appreciate that we'll be gaining more information in reference to that. So as part of the new record keeping then and being able to provide those averages, would you also then be able to provide the actual time on scene for those major events and provide not just averages, but medians?
Yes. Essentially, how we extract it and compile it in the future is going to look basically however we want it to look, that we can change those variables to create those reports. And so as quick as we have that, we start inputting the data with these calls, we will certainly play around with some different presentations, and then we will definitely be seeking feedback from council on exactly what you'd like to see and how you'd like to see it, and then we'll build it that way going forward. So we're certainly open to those conversations.
Thank you.
CEO.
Justin, just a comment on that. Because statistics are very important to have baselines for it, could we be able to go back to January 1st of 2021 when we do agree on what the metrics will be? So we'll consistently report on the same thing, and therefore they'll have tremendous meaning into the future year after year.
Absolutely, it will be retroactive.
Okay.
Excellent. Any other questions? Comments, concerns? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion on the table. All in favor of the motion? And that motion is carried 7-0. Thank you very much, Fire Chief Andrew. I was going to say director, but it's both the same.
I know what you mean, it's okay.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item, we have the Olds RCMP Detachment, CEO Merritt. Would you like to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I would like to introduce our acting commander of the Olds RCMP Detachment, Staff Sergeant Jody Timchuk. I hope I got that close to being right.
Yes, that's very good.
We certainly welcome you here to the town of Olds. This is your first week here and the first presentation to council. While we are going to miss Jim McDonald, who was our staff sergeant in the past, we are certainly looking forward to having you be with us for a period of time and to keep us updated on all the activities of the RCMP. So with that, Staff Sergeant Timchuk, I'll pass the floor over to you.
Thank you. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me okay.
We can.
Okay, perfect. So I'll get right into the stats. I'm not sure, everybody kind of presents stats differently. And if you guys are looking for something different than what I speak about today, please feel free to ask any questions there at the end. And you guys have the presentation that Jim forwarded to you guys?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, perfect. On the first page,
Merritt.
Sorry, Mr. Fox, did you have a comment?
Yale Merritt had a comment.
Yeah, I
Oh,
just
sorry.
was wondering if we'd be able to put the presentation up for people to see us.
yes, for sure. Yeah,
Okay.
if you guys can. Perfect. So I'll be speaking to the fourth quarter stats, which are from October 2019, sorry, October 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, and then I'll go over our year-end stats as well through this presentation. So on the, you could go to the next slide, please. So on this slide, it's showing, this is strictly for the town of Olds, and comparing it to 2019, we have a decrease of 22% for the total criminal code offenses. We have a decrease of persons crimes of 20%. Property crimes is 35%. And other criminal code has increased and up to 20%. And I'll go into a little bit more detail throughout the presentation on which ones increased and why. So we have three different ones here on the bottom of this page. We have a decrease of break and enters. For 2020, we had 8 fewer break and enters. We had 57% decrease in theft of motor vehicle, and which turns out to be 66 fewer instances. And theft under 5,000, we have a decrease of 39%, which is 89 fewer instances. And it's a lot to do with COVID, and it's a personal opinion that it has a lot to do with people staying home and being able to protect their property. And a lot of these guys that are traveling or looking for opportunities know that more people are at home because of the lockdown, and the numbers are down for sure. You go to the next slide. So this next slide, just for your reference, this is for the rural detachment area that we police. We're seeing similar numbers for all the decreases. We have a decrease of 29% for the total criminal code offenses. Persons crime was 20% down. Property crime was 34% down. Other criminal code was 4% decrease. And then we also saw large numbers in a decrease in regards to the break and enters, where we had 33 fewer instances. Theft of motor vehicles were down 51%. It turned out to 29 fewer instances, and a decrease of 41% for theft under 5,000, which is 43 fewer instances. And this is all compared to 2019, and the province in general is seeing all areas very similar in these decreases. You can go to the next slide. So in regards to fourth quarter stats, and this is from October to December 31st, we had no homicides, no robberies reported. Sexual assaults were down 50%. And so we went from 2019, there was 6, 2020, there was 3. Sexual offenses, there was only 1 in this fourth quarter, and it's down 50%. We've seen an increase in assaults, and this is mainly due to spousal assaults. And so we went from, in 2019, we had 13 in this quarter, and in 2020, we had 25, and which is an increase of 92%. We had no kidnappings reported, no extortion for 2020. Harassment calls were increased by 100%. We went from 3 in 2019 to 6 in 2020. And uttering threats, we saw 4 for both years. So in the fourth quarter, we had an increase of 34% in the person's crimes, which is mainly to do with spousal assaults or assaults that took place. So in the stats for the complete year, we saw a decrease on all of them, except for assaults. For 2020, we had 58, and in 2019, we had 53, which was a 9% increase for the year. And extortion, we had 100% increase. We went from 1 in 2019 to 2 in 2020. And everything else was a decrease. But for the year, we had persons crimes, we had 110 instances, compared to in 2019, we had 138. So we have a complete decrease of 20%. We go to the next slide. So in regards to property crime, we saw a decrease right throughout the board here. So break and enters in the fourth quarter, we had 5 compared to in 2019, we had 21. So we saw a decrease of 76%. Theft of motor vehicles went down drastically to 17 this quarter versus in 2019, we had 48. Theft over 5,000, we had 1 in 2020 compared to 2 in 2019. Theft under 5,000, we had 34 in 2020 and 64 in 2019. Possession of stolen goods stayed the same at 15. Frauds, we saw a decrease of, we had 17 in 2020, and in 2019, we had 21. We had no arsons reported in this quarter. And mischief files have been down as well from 42 files in 2020, and it was reported at 70 in 2019. So we saw a decrease in this quarter by 46% in all property crimes. And the stats for the year are, if you guys are running out of time, I'm not sure how much time you actually usually give for me. I'm going through it pretty thorough, and if you guys want something shorter or more explanation, just let me know while we're going, no problems.
Well, actually, you could probably just do some highlights of each page, maybe.
Okay,
We've all
sounds,
read the report.
you bet.
Thanks.
So the property crimes for the year, it's we had 492 reports in 2020, and in 2019 we had 755. So in total, the property crime has gone down in 2020 by 35%. You go to the next slide. So other criminal code, majority of it is to do with giving more time to the officer to look at other files or focus on repeat offenders or somebody that's on conditions. And it that's why you'll see these stats go up usually when the other calls of service go down. So one on this page I'll note is the fail to comply or other breaches. it gives the officers more time to do their job and actually check on people that are on conditions or curfews. And in this quarter, we saw an increase of 132%. And in 2020, we had 79 files, and in 2019, we're down to 34. So we saw a slight increase in that. And for this other criminal code for 2020, we had 269 compared to 216, and it's gone up 20% in total for 2020. We go to the next slide. So we saw, and this goes hand in hand with giving officers more time as well to work on other investigations. And we have drug possession has gone up in 2020 to 5 charges and or for 5 investigations, and compared to 2 in 2019, and it gives it a 150% increase. Drug trafficking, we have 6 in 2020 and 1 in 2019, and that's gone up 500%. And so a total of 12 investigations for 2020 compared to 4 in 2019. We could go to the next slide. Vehicle collisions were up slightly this quarter. We had 4 compared to 2019. Property damage for motor vehicles over 2,000, we had 26 in 2020 and 35 in 2019. And we saw a decrease of 23% in the fourth quarter, from 34 in 2020 to 44 in total from 2019. And in 2020, our total collisions were 157, and in 2019 there were 187, so a decrease of 16%. We go next slide. So other common policing activities that we looked at for the stats, we got false alarms, false 911 calls have gone down. We had a slight increase in the fourth quarter for suspicious persons or vehicles compared to 2019. And missing persons files went down this quarter from 3 to 4. And spousal abuse went up from 23 files in 2020 compared to 12 files in 2019. So it's gone up 92%. Mental health has also gone up. We had 26 files in this quarter, and compared to last quarter was 22. So there is a slight increase of 18% for the mental health files. And so for 2020, majority of those have all gone down, except missing persons. We actually had a 15% increase compared to 2019, and the spousal assaults, we've had an increase of 23% for the year. And that's, next slide is the questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Sergeant. Could I look at, anybody have any questions? Any of the members of council, questions, comments? Councillor Harper, and then Councillor Butts.
I'll start first with a motion if you want, Deputy Mayor.
Oh, you don't have to.
Oh, okay.
We can go to questions first and then a motion after.
Okay, thank you. Just in reference to the overall, and I'm not sure if it's a fair question, but so hopefully you have a fair comment. Is this indicative of what's happening across the K Division area, the decrease overall, except for the mental health issues?
You know what, I can't comment 100% accuracy on that. I do know that property crime has dropped across the province, and I didn't look at the mental health at this time, so I can't 100% say, but from comparing it to Sundre, the stats are very similar to what we're seeing in that detachment as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harper, oh, sorry, Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. I guess a question I wanted to do was going back a little bit to your drug trafficking and seeing a 500% increase in drug trafficking is a little bit concerning, even though it was total over the year only 6. Is this prolific offenders that you're seeing, or is it like more of the bad drugs as compared to, you know, what I guess what you call your minor drugs? I don't know if you can answer that, if that's a specific or fair question, but you know, is it
It is
more?
a fair question, and to be honest with you, I don't have an answer for you right now, but I definitely could get that for you. This being my first day, I don't know the history on what exactly took place for those
Yeah.
files specifically, but I definitely could look into it and get back to you guys.
That would be great. I'm just a
Okay.
little curious about the prolific as compared to brand new, or is this, hopefully
Yep.
this is not an increase in trend we're going to start to see due to COVID and all the restrictions and the mental health issues that people are starting to endure.
Yeah.
The longer that we seem to have restrictions in place, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and it's something I'd like to look into myself as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Overwater.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and to Staff Sergeant Tinmanchuk. Do I say that right?
You did.
Okay, perfect. On your statistics here for persons crimes, were there no homicides at all in 2020? As I think around the community, we sort of understood that there was one. So, or is that still under investigation? Is that why it doesn't get reported, or have we heard incorrect
I don't have the
information?
answer for that specific. When do you think this? When was the report?
December.
Sorry,
I'm thinking December.
December.
May I speak to that, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
you may,
Yeah, I did inquire the situation with the former staff sergeant. There were no homicides recorded in 2020.
okay, interesting. Okay, thanks.
okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Harper.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate the fact, Staff Sergeant Timchuk, that you're filling in on a temporary basis for the Olds detachment. And I want to thank you for that. And just wondering how often you will actually be spending time at the Olds detachment.
So I am going to be here full time, so every day. I've been seconded to Olds until the position's been filled, and I'll be making contact with you guys on a regular basis. And if you have any questions, feel free to call or visit or email whenever you can. And so I'll be here on a full-time basis.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you. And I do have one question for you, Sergeant Timchuk, and that is, when you talked about the assaults and the increase in assaults, you had likened it to an increase in spousal assaults, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so when we have the separate category for spousal abuse, are they equated to each other?
Which one? You mean which abuse? Sorry.
Sorry, the spousal abuse is
Yeah.
23 in the fourth quarter, and the total number of assaults in the fourth quarter was 25. So are they are the spousal abuse combined into the assaults totals?
So I'm going to make sure I get the right answer here for you. I would say they are combined.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're looking at, from the stats that I have here, we're looking at, so for the fourth quarter, we have 23 spousal abuse assaults and in a total of 25. So there'd be two common assaults, and then the rest would be spousal assault.
Okay, so only 2 of those assaults
Yeah.
would not have been spousal related.
Yeah, for the fourth quarter.
And I would imagine we see this increase because of the of COVID. Is that what you're thinking?
That'd probably play part of it, yes.
All right,
More people spending more time at home together, and that could be a possibility of being related to COVID
okay.
or to the restrictions.
All right, thank you very much. All
You're
right,
welcome.
may I entertain a motion then? Counselor Thompson,
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I would move that we accept the fourth quarter and year-to-date statistics for 2020 from the Olds RCMP as information.
okay, thank you. All right, any other comments, questions, or concerns? Well, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that motion carries 7-0. Thank you. We'll move along to the Olds Municipal Enforcement and CAO. Would you like to make the introduction?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And we have Eric Christensen, the Senior Community Peace Officer, here to do a presentation on the fourth quarter statistics. Director Andrew, do you have any comments to make before Mr. Christensen goes into his presentation?
No, I don't. I will turn it to Eric. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, CAO Merritt and your worship and council members. So we had a,
Sorry, Sergeant Christensen, would you like to share your screen, or Mr. Fox, would you like to share the screen? Mr. Christensen's report.
there we go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
All right, so this will actually be the last time that I actually get to say that I can't compare it to the previous year, because now we have a full year of reporting since I've been here. So going forward, we'll be able to compare this past year to any years coming forward. We had a pretty successful year in my eyes anyway. We had, so in Cara properties, we had 91 snow removal, ice type issues in the quarter, 11 unsightlies. So what that would be trees hanging over properties onto the sidewalk that we had to get cleaned up, or vehicles parked on front lawns, that type of stuff. So we had a total of 220 community standards files for this year, or for this quarter. Our traffic was, now these are complaint-driven complaints from residents. We had 43 traffic files, 16 other bylaws. So we had a total of 281 files for the fourth quarter. Most of our stuff, of course, was parking. With that in our fourth quarter. Contact reports are when someone just calls in and asks for information. There's no follow-up required. We had 145 of those files. Out of the 281 files, we had 102 were actually officer-generated files. So these are while the officers are out patrolling the streets and sidewalks, the town, that we would create a file on our own. 118 of them were from residents complaining. For our violations, we had a total of 537 provincial violations. Out of that, 465 were warnings, 72 were actual violations. On the municipal side, we had 19 municipal tags issued, 14 were warnings, 5 were actual violations, and we had 2 positive tickets. Now with positive tickets in the wintertime, it actually slows down because we don't have as much going on, but those will of course pick up as the weather gets better. So having said that, our year to date, we had 1,252 files total for municipal enforcement. Out of that, 444 were officer generated and 557 were complaint driven. And we had 518 contact reports. For our violations for the year end, we had 1,461 provincial tickets, 1,137 were Warnings, 324 were violations. We had 62 municipal tickets, 41 being warnings, 21 being actual violations, and we had 65 positive tickets for a total of 1,588 violations issued. For our animals impounded, we haven't had a lot in the last little bit. We had 24 total cats for the year and 8 dogs that we had picked up and had to impound into shelter. So if we go down, it's broken down a little bit. The next slide, please. Just breaks it down to what we just discussed there, into individual, how much was community standards, how much was traffic, animal control, etc. Next slide. It's just breaking down how it's reported by officer observed or dispatch, staff or phone, emails, reported problems. Next slide. Just shows our fourth quarter by report type. So we had 94% of our stuff was provincial, and only 3.4% is municipal. And the reason why you see a big difference in that is whenever we can issue a provincial ticket, we prefer to go that way. It's cheaper for the town, because if we issue a violation under the municipal, it's very expensive for us to prosecute in court if we have to go that way. So we try to flip it over to provincial where we pay for it anyway. Next slide. And this just breaks it down by how much was warning. So 85% of our interactions in the last quarter were warnings, so 85%. So we would have the awaiting disposition is a ticket that's been issued but has not been paid yet. And then 1.8% of our stuff has been paid in the quarter here. Next slide is just our contact reports. So it's just like I said, we document every phone call we get, and if it's no follow-up, we just record it under this contact report. Next slide, please. So this is our total violations for 2020. As you can see, we had $69,084 of violations that were issued. So this is an actual dollar value of what we've written. So far, only 24,000 of it has been paid. 45 of it we're still waiting for payment. Now, when we write a ticket, it can take up to 2 years from the day we write the ticket to when we actually see payment. And that's just the way that the court system works. If they get convicted in absence or they plead guilty, they don't pay it till they actually get their registration. So with the way the registration system works, you can get registration for 2 years at a time. So that's why I'm saying sometimes we can wait two years to get our money. Next slide, please. And then, so here's a fairly large number. So this is the amount of warnings. So $197.44 was actual dollar value of our education in the town of Olds. Now, again, there's a huge difference in between Officer Reed and myself, and that was because we didn't have an in-car radar in the car. But as you can see, we spend a lot of time doing education throughout the community in regards to traffic enforcement. Next slide, please. And then I just broke down just the speeding portion of it. So this was $75,000 that we issued in warnings for speeding. Again, I explained the difference before. So next slide, please. This is a new slide that I just introduced on our last quarter. So what we started doing was keeping track of all of our files and whether we had an officer on duty or a officer not available or an officer that's unable to attend. So that would be if an officer's in training or away, he's kind of on shift but not able to deal with files. That's 4% of our time. where we had no officer on duty. For instance, if a file came in on a Sunday when we didn't have anybody working, then it would be considered not on duty. Or if it came in, so for instance, one of our shifts is from 11:30 till 10 o'clock at night. If it came in the morning, we would document it as no officer on at that time. So majority of our time, we have an officer on duty. 72% of the time of our files, we have somebody available to take a call. So that's a pretty good number. Next slide, please. All right, so snow removal. So we've been busy with working with our public works, and this is just talking about the roadways. We've worked really close this year, and we were able to really get the education out. So our fourth quarter, we issued 292 violations. 283 of those were warnings, and 9 of those were actual tickets issued. So how we did it this year is you got 1 free warning. You got a freebie. And so if we came back on the second time it snowed and we were doing that area, if you had already gotten a warning, you got a violation. So we had some pretty good compliance in regards to that. And just as a side note, I put 2021, just for January, we had 103 violations issued and 91 of them were warnings and 12 were tickets. So we're really getting the education out to the public that, we're out there to clean the streets, and we're looking for their assistance in that. Next slide, please. Great Neighbors Program. We've been busy. It did slow down a little bit once summer came and people were out, they relaxed some of the conditions. But we did, in the fourth quarter, we did 6. And so far in 2021, in 2021, we've done 6. To date, we've done 105 of them throughout the town. So it's really well received. I've had everything from 6-month-old babies to, I think, what the mayor and I did as someone that was 82. So we've had 65th anniversaries. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of people have really enjoyed it. It's been fun, and we've been working with our first responder partners on that as well. So we try to get everybody involved that can be. So next slide, please. Sidewalk snow removal. So we've been busy patrolling the areas, trying to get on top of the sidewalks. In our fourth quarter, we had 91 warnings that we've issued to residents for not clearing their sidewalks. We didn't have a ton of snow, and everybody was really good at getting their snow removal. But as a side note, for January of this year, we've issued 139 sidewalks for the month of January, and 165 were sidewalks, and 139 of those were officer observed. So shows that our officers are out there giving everybody notices for their sidewalks that we can find and catch. And we had really good compliance. We've had very few that we've actually had to send in a contractor to clean them. So it's been very well received on that end. Next slide, please. So our traffic initiatives, October was Pedestrian Safety Month. We did a lot of education at our crosswalks, including some pedestrians, not just cars. We actually had some chats. Well, I did have some chats with some pedestrians for not using the crosswalks properly or not using the lights when they should be, and crossing against the traffic lights, etc. November was child safety seats. And again, we don't only just do this in November, it's all year round. But if we stop somebody that has a car seat in it, we do make sure that it is secured properly. I am a certified tech for installing car seats, so I have quite a bit of experience working with car seats. December was Impaired Driving Month. And I just want to note again, as we did earlier, is that CPOs don't have authority for impaired operation. And if we do come across it, we would call the RCMP. But if they are unavailable to attend, we as peace officers have the authority to give a 24-hour suspension and follow that process. Next slide, please. And just again, we've been, although traffic is not our mandate, we educate residents as much as we possibly can in different traffic issues or problems. And we do that in between our bylaw calls. So it's like I said, it's not our main mandate, but we do deal with it when we do see it. And I just wanted to make a comment. So myself, I'm a level 1 CDSA inspector. And this is to ensure that our commercial vehicles are operating within the town limits that are deemed to be safe on the road. This is a national designation. And if I could get a job in Mexico, I probably would go because it's the same criteria down there as it is here. It is a North American standard. So whether you're in Canada, the United States, or Mexico, all three of us, we have the same level of training to do this. It's a fairly hard course to get, and it's a designation that you don't want to lose. With that, I'm required to do 32 inspections a year. So I try to work them out throughout the year. But again, I sometimes, because other things are more important, I kind of sometimes get behind on them. So sometimes you'll see me doing a few more than at one time. I did want to say though that out of those 32 inspections, 5 of those vehicles I did take out of service. So it's showing that, you know, we need to be watching these commercial vehicles coming through town. The one notably is it had an unsecured propane tank that was heating the candy in the back of his truck. It was not secured. It was just lit. It was just sitting in the middle there. So if he would have hit the brakes, it could have flown one way or the other. Could have blew up. Could have started a fire. Whatever. The other ones were just unsecured loads. So those are loads that aren't secured properly that could, you know, fall off onto one of our residents or that type of stuff. And because we have the 2 major highways coming through town, there is a lot of commercial vehicle traffic. Next slide, please. Again, we've been really trying to be proactive in the school zones and playground zones. In 2020, we issued 66 violations, 57 of those being warnings, and actual 9 violations that were issued. And you know, as the years goes on, we will continue those patrols. And we have worked with the RCMP doing speed enforcement campaigns on whenever they're not busy, and whenever we're not busy, we can get together and do it. So we try to get those in there when we can. Next slide, please. And just a little bit of an update. As of January 1st, we changed our shift schedule. So now we do have 7-day-a-week coverage, except for vacations and sick time. We have 2 sets of shifts that is either from 7 till 5:30 or 11:30 till 10 o'clock at night. And we are trying to encourage residents that if they do have a bylaw complaint, to call our dispatch line, which is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they actually have our schedule, so they know when an officer's working, when an officer's going to be in, and we'll let the resident know that. But if it is an emergency, they will tell them to hang up and dial 911. As we go forward, as much as I'd like the snow to stop, we will continue with our sidewalks to ensure that they are being cleared as per the CSB of 48 hours. The other one that's been kind of a unfortunate thing is we've been getting a lot of graffiti showing up. In fact, I just found some here on Saturday. So we are going to be working on a process of how we're going to get this graffiti cleaned up. What we have started doing is myself and Officer Reed have been trying to document where we're finding it so that we can, as soon as it warms up a little bit, we can get it cleaned up, including, you know, our utility boxes, fences, that type of stuff. So we are making a database so that we can get onto it as soon as it warms up. And again, we're going to be working with the CSB to see if we can tweak the wording a little bit into the CSB and how we're going to go forward for the winter months. Next slide, please. Oh, questions.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much, Sergeant Christensen, for your presentation. And I'll entertain some questions. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Under the municipal enforcement updates, and pardon me if I've missed it, but where we've got our Yellowhead dispatch number, I believe we've already shared it once or twice, but would this be something that we could continue with a regular did you know? And I've seen increased did you knows on Facebook recently, and this could have been one of them and I missed it. I apologize, but I think all of this information under your update would be very good to have on the did you know, and someplace reasonably easy to access even on our webpage. Just a
So it is-
comment I'd like to make.
Okay,
And thank you for your presentation too, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. So it is on the website under bylaw enforcement. We
Right.
actually have it there. We have issued it under Did You Knows, and we've also had it in the newspaper quite a bit. Whenever
Okay,
there was some free
perfect.
space, Monica would put it into the newspaper. So we are getting it out there. I'd like to get, if we had a little extra money, I'd like to get some fridge magnets that we could give out or something down the road. So.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mayor Bushishka.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Staff Sergeant Christensen, I just wanted to touch and maybe expand a little bit on a comment you made a little bit earlier, because I did get several informal citizens' inquiries as to why in the month of December you had been sitting on the highway and pulling over and inspecting commercial vehicles. You did lately touch on it. You do have a minimum every year to keep that certification, and other things kept you away from doing that spread out over the year. But there in December, you needed to get that final number so that you could keep your accreditation. So just wanted to let the residents of Olds know that the reason you focused on that in December was to make sure that you could continue to offer that service, very vital service, by the way. Thank you to our community and keep our roads safe.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson and Councillor Overwater.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Through yourself to either Sergeant Christensen or Director Andrew, recently we've had some questions around the use of recording devices. Can you tell us whether we use recording devices and how that use is regulated?
You want me to answer that, Director Andrews? All right. So there was a bulletin from the Solicitor General from 2015 that allowed peace officers to wear body cameras, and we had a bulletin that basically advised us of how we had to have a policy in place in order to wear body cams. So I can say that back in 2017, I wrote a very extensive policy and procedures in regards to the use of body cams for the city of Wetaskiwin. It was approved back then by the Solicitor General, and it was also readdressed about 2 months ago at the city of Wetaskiwin, and it passed their criteria for having the body cams. When I came to the town of Olds, I used that same policy and procedure, and it was approved again on December 8th of 2019 by the Solgen. So it has been audited based on their criteria for the body cams. Our officers do follow the policy and procedures that are set out. In regards to the storage of the equipment or storage of the information, they are stored as per the Solgen's policy, has to be retained for 3 years unless it's an officer complaint against an officer. It has to be kept for 5 years. The system that we use is a standalone computer that only Officer Reed and myself have access to, and we're the only ones that have the password for it. It is not hooked up to the network. It is not accessible by anybody else. The program is secured, and again, it is also password protected for only myself and Officer Reed to have access to it. The system automatically is set up to remove the files after 3 years, unless it has to be locked for an officer investigation, or if something has to be kept for longer than the 3 years, it's locked. It wouldn't be removed. It would have to be manually deleted by myself. administrator of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilor Overwater?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Yeah, I just want to thank Sergeant Christensen. I think we're very fortunate to have your expertise, your education in our community. I don't think a lot of communities have the level of our municipal enforcement officers that you do. So, you know, I'm thankful that you're here. You're here, you know, keeping our community safe and well looked after. So I certainly want to commend you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Councilor Overwater. I was going to mention the same thing. I think we really benefit from Sergeant Christensen's experience and knowledge in the area, and certainly has a lot of training that he brings to the table, which we never had before. So thank you very much. Are there any other comments, questions, or concerns? Councillor Bennett.
I too would like to thank Eric for all his hard work and all his previous experience, and for choosing Olds to come and live. I will also prepare a motion if you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bennett.
I move to accept the fourth quarter municipal enforcement statistics for information.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that motion is carried 7-0. Thank you. And Sergeant Christensen, you're not allowed to go to Mexico, by the way.
Only if I go to the States first, I heard.
No, you can't do that either. All right, thank you. Moving along, we're going to 3D, which is Operations and Capital Project, and CEO Merritt. Could you?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I'm going to ask Director Chant to lead this discussion, and then I believe we have a presenter for the Operations Center. So, Director Chant.
Thank you through the chair. Yes, this month's update is going to be brought to you by two gentlemen from MPE Engineering. Greg Sentis is our main project manager that's looking after the town on our behalf with the Operations Center. So I did attach some photographs to the agenda just to sort of give a progress of what the site looked like once upon a time to where we're at today, and ever changing week by week. So I'd like to introduce Greg Sentis and Andrew Simpson to give a brief update to council on where we're at with the Operations Center. So Greg, it is up. It's all yours.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce ourselves. My name is Greg Sentis. I am the lead project manager for the Olds Operational Center. Working with me is Andrew Simpson. Andrew is the day-to-day contact with and liaison between the town and Modco, the contractor on site. So far, the project is moving along fairly well. We are still well within the budgets for the project. We are progressing with all the interior work, as Scott will show, and some photos that he has, as well as bringing it forward as much was discussed in today's meeting about COVID. We did have a delay on one of our components out there due to COVID. It was the air handling unit, which controls and circulates the air within the work bays. That was projected. Now it's a 4-week delivery delay. The contractor did order it well within time, but due to the factory in the States being shut down, and of course with the not being able to control border crossings right now, and when materials are released through the border, they have worked very hard with their suppliers and with the delivery to get it here, hopefully installed and commissioned by the end of March. On that report, with the year being as nice as it is, the project is going fairly decent, and we have not really had any issues on site, and we don't anticipate any coming up. Are there any questions?
Before we go to questions, did Mr. Simpson have any comments?
No, I think that pretty well covers it.
Okay, thank you. And Director Chant, do you have any additional information?
Nothing additional at this time with the operations center. We won't go through slide picture by picture. I was there for people to look at and just sort of get a sense of what's there. There is a whole lot of other pictures that could be added, but they're individual spots, and the general public probably not very exciting to look at. Electrical conduits run or air handling units run within a building. You may notice on one of the pictures, just reviewing it, is the question would be is why doesn't the paint go all the way to the ceiling? The line where the paint finishes is where the suspended ceiling would start. So just as if you looked at that and didn't have the full picture, you'd go, well, they didn't quite paint the wall right to the top. That's done on purpose in that aspect. But no, we'd like to thank Greg and Andrew for we're in contact with them daily, several times a day, back and forth. So the information flow between the town to the contractor does go all through Andrew and Greg. We do not go to the contractor separately, and seems to be working very well. And I'd like to thank them for joining us today, and they'll answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Director Chant, and CEO Merritt.
I don't think we have to go through every picture, but it would be nice to highlight a few of the pictures, especially the inside ones, to say what they are, what location they might be into the future, so to speak. I think that would be good for the public to hear.
Sounds good.
Okay, so there, the front page there, you're looking at the very first picture was what the site looked like. It was the former wastewater treatment plant site that had to be reclaimed after the wastewater treatment plant was closed down and we went regional. So it's just a kind of a, from a here and now perspective. The next picture right below that is reclamation in progress. If we scroll down to the next page. So there you'll see reclamation is complete. You'll see a black rectangle box. That's with the foundation being poured in place of the new operations center. Picture right below that is a stormwater retention pond. All new developments now have to meet a stormwater management plan with Alberta Environment. And that's one of the requirements, was to control your runoff of site before it hits any water course. So we were no exemption, that we had to have an approved stormwater retention pond that's registered with Alberta Environment. Next page, please. So as you can see, the picture from outside at the gate of the admin side taking shape, with the exterior going on and most of the windows in place. Below that is the foundation for the shop area with the administration in the back of the photo there. Next, please. So this one here is just another one of the admin building. The next one where you see all the lumber on the floor and the open roof joists, that is of the second level prior to starting to fill in with the walls and things like that. Just show you the type of construction, lots of work taking place. Next page, please. So this is some of the pitches where, for the average person probably wouldn't get a whole lot out of, other than you can see the venting in the ceiling, which is part of our training room, large open space for all staff meeting. The next one being the training room. The air handling side hasn't gone into that room just yet. So it just kind of gives you a bit of an indication of the paint only goes, 3/4 of the way up the wall or 9/10 of the way up the wall, T-bar ceiling to go in. That will not go in until after all of the air handling units are put in, sprinkler system, electrical conduits, things like that. So an incredible amount of work takes place when, if you drive out there and sort of, do the drive-by, you may not think there's a lot of stuff working, but just like any renovation, the interior side of administration side is a lot of work, a lot of drywall, especially all of those ceilings have to be double drywalled to meet the fire code. So that's, and between each layer has to be mud and taped as well. So bless the guys that are on stilts and do that mudding and taping. There was a lot of mud and tape goes in there. that's kind of a quick highlight there of those pitches.
Thank you very much, Director Chant. And thank you very much to Mr. Sentes and Mr. Simpson for your providing some information to council. It's nice to see that the building is going along as on progress, I guess, on budget. That's great. Any questions from council? Council Overwater.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. There's been a bit of discussion with the whole frame from, is it ModPro or Modco?
Modco.
Modco. And were there any problems with it being moved from where it was to the present location? And was there any added expense due to that fact? Like, was it the size that we thought it was, or was there any problems at all with that piece of the building?
Thank you through the chair. No, there was no added extra cost when they submitted their project value for the building. The frame has passed all of its inspections. It was sent out to be sandblasted and then to have some welding done to it that would incorporate the doors and things like that. I believe that is actually the frame is to be delivered back on site again the end of last week or beginning of this week and start going up. So no added cost. It was all within the budget amount that they had given us in that aspect.
Okay, I'm sorry, just supplemental. I'm a little confused. I thought the frame was for that frame of the building. Is it another part of that building?
No,
I mean, it looks like the building's up.
No, all that you see there right now is the administration portion of the building. The skeleton frame that's will be going up is for the shop bays to be attached to the back of that.
All right, thank you. Councillor Thompson and Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is my first major construction project as far as being a councillor on with the community while it's happened, and I'm wondering, just for the general public, if we can provide just a brief summary of the process we went through to design, source, and now build the facility we're constructing. Mr. Chan?
Yeah, or if Mr. Merritt would like to do that. So I guess any major project that we have, whether it being a building or road project, things like that, we go out for requests for proposals. Do a criteria on the request for proposals from everything from experience, price, availability. So there's more than just criteria or just price. So we look at that. We get submissions that come in. In this project here, we had a lot of submissions come in. We then evaluate those, all of those conditions that we asked for to deem if they're complete or not complete. They must, if they don't fill out all the paperwork and have not provided all the information, we can deem them as incomplete. So on that deadline, so they're evaluated, they're reviewed. Then there's a ranking system that's put to them. In this process, there was 3 successful companies that met that criteria. We then went to the next step of interviewing those 3 companies. So that's part of the process, right? Is you do the interview to find out who the project manager is, who is their lead contact, all of those type of things on that aspect. Then once we go through that interview process, we evaluate again to find out who would be the successful component. On many of our comments is that, or projects that we have, the interview part of the project can really give you a clear insight of whether they know what they're bidding on and what they're not bidding on. So they put all the paperwork in, all the safety requirements and stuff like that, but the interview process really can set that stage of, are they in over their heads or are they not? Can they handle a project of this size? Even with road work programs, do they understand how to build a road? So all of those things take place. So it is, it's months to deal with that process. It's not a matter of just, we open up the phone book and get somebody. This one here was, it's called design build. So it had a lot of the town forces involved in this of what is needed to make this building functional. You can get a building built for you that was totally not functional for what we need. So with the design build, the contractor works with administration and the crews that are actually going to be operating out of this building to make sure that it's there to meet their needs. This one here, so at the end of the day, this company was selected because they had part of every process we have, there's called a value added section, and they were able to provide a value added, which Councillor Overwood had asked about that frame. That's a value added piece to this project. It also gave us enough capacity to be able to expand with very little to minimal costs associated with that. The next component down was basically give us square footage for square footage. If we've seen any growth, we would have been coming for a capital expansion, which nobody would want to see anytime soon. So that's where we're at with this piece. It is then the contract is awarded, and once it's awarded, then they start to work. Same system happened with the project management. So we put out a request for proposal for project management of this facility as well. Exact same process that we just talked about. RFP submissions come in, they're evaluated, they were interviewed, and Mr. Sentis and Simpson were successful in procuring that process and are our project managers. So they're there to be our liaison. The contractor then goes through MPE engineering. So any change order that has to happen for anything that's unforeseen or all that sort of stuff has to have the blessing from MPE engineering first. So that's where they can negotiate with the contractor. Is no, this isn't valid. This was part of your contract. Sorry, you don't get to get paid for that. Or yes, this is reasonable because there's either been a change or for it was maybe missed. We've had very little of those in this aspect. And then once a month is they send us as being the town of Olds, they send us a letter of recommendation to pay the following invoice. So there's lots of checks and balances back and forth to this that before company is paid, that it's gone through those checks and balances in that aspect. And then at the end of it is like any other project, there is a substantial completion, which then basically it's a walkthrough, and then everybody agrees that it's to the stage where it can be handed over. That is that's sort of the quick highlight of the process.
Thank you, Director Chant, and I think that information has been provided before to council and to the media. CEO Merritt, you had a comment.
I think that was a great overview, Scott, about the two processes. It also has to follow all legal aspects of an agreement, and it also has to follow all trade aspects, whether they're provincial, international, or national trade agreements that have to be followed. This process has to follow it. The substantive amount of money that's being spent on it, it ensures that people are able to basically bid, so we can get competitive bids from across usually Canada or Western Canada or into the United States as well. So, but I think Scott gave a very good overview of what these two processes are, and they're very much matched type of processes.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for that additional information, Mr. Merritt. Councillor Harper, and then Member Zizka.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Through you to Mr. Sentis or Mr. Simpson. So the building that we saw in the pictures, the administrative part of the operations center, how many square feet is that? And to Mr. Scott, how many employees would be housed in that part of the building?
I'll let Mr. Sentis answer that if he knows it right off the top of his head. I don't think we've measured the square footage of the administration area, but we can dig that
I
up.
think it's part of the design, isn't it?
Yes, but we have it right at our fingertips. Looks like he's pulling up the,
I've got the plans in front of me through the chair there. If you give me a minute to look it up, I just don't know off the top of my head what the actual square footage is.
Okay,
so
so
while he's looking at that, looking that up. So right now, the intent is for all of the operations outside staff to be housed in that unit. So that'll be all of parks, public works, utilities, and facilities maintenance person, along with the admin and the, if we fill the, when we fill the manager of operations, they'll be out of that area as well.
Thank you.
And there'll be seasonal staff from the aquatic, from the sportsplex as well that will go over there and operate out of there. The good piece about that was everything will be housed under one roof. You know, all of our equipment, all of our staff, all of that stuff. So we'll definitely see some efficiencies there.
thank you, Director Chant. Do you have any idea what the total number of full-time people are? Because obviously we have seasonal workers, so that might change. Those numbers will change, but if you can figure out that number, I think that would.
So the approximately 20 staff.
20 staff. Okay. Thank you.
That's without summer staff. That's permanent staff.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Sentis, did you find that number for Councillor Harper?
Yes, I did. Through the chair, the Bay Area, which is your shops, is 44,000 square foot. That's spread out between 3. And then the administration buildings, they are equal to 8,500 square foot per floor. I'd like to make a correction on that. Your first level total, which includes the bays and the administration, is the 44,000 square feet. And then there's an additional 8,500 square foot on the second floor of the administration building.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Majewska.
Just a couple further points of clarification, CAO or Director Chant, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. The reason this building's the size it is, you don't have to correct me on this because I'm 100% sure on this, is we've designed this to take care of the town of Olds over the next 30, 40, perhaps even 50 years without any further expansion. The same sort of idea we did back in 1980 when we built our sportsplex with 2 ice surfaces. We certainly didn't need 2 ice surfaces back in 1980, but here we are 40 years later, 41 years later, and that building's still serving us very, very well. So we took the same approach with the operations center going forward, that this is something that we're going to grow into over the next 4 to 5 decades. And to touch back onto the procurement process, a lot of that is mandated by the Alberta government. The town of Olds doesn't have a whole bunch of say in the way we do those procurements. The other aspect to that is, and maybe Director Chant, you can touch on it, is there is a contingency in our procurement process to allow for local businesses, even if they are slightly higher in cost, for us to hire local as opposed to going to a company out of Calgary or Edmonton or wherever it happens. If you'd like to maybe explain that one a little bit too.
So if I can just answer that a little bit, maybe Director Lindeman might be able to on the legal aspect. But as a project of this size, anything over 75,000 has to be put on the Alberta Purchasing Connection website, which is that, as CEO Merritt had indicated, that is that's through the free trade agreement, TILMA and stuff like that. At that size, there is it is all competitive. Through the interview process, we can't mandate to these companies on this size of project who they get to use as their subcontractors, but this contractor specifically was very, very interested in, in all intensive purposes, they are local to the area, with having land in Cremona and having a piece there. So when you talk about Mountain View County, that's within our jurisdiction. They're there. They were very much wanting to use as much local labor and materials as they could, long as that the dollars and cents were there. So, we do have, as reported in a different council meeting before, we have people from Didsbury, from Sundre, that are doing a lot of construction out there that are very close to home and injecting back into our economy. So that is that's part of that piece, with that flavor. The other piece to that is you're correct in this wasn't built for today. This is built for the future. And it's, there is lots of room for us to grow, and as our mayor said, 30 to 40 years time, we would still be in this facility with enough room to grow. So you don't want to build it too small right off the get-go.
Yep. Thank you, Director Chant. And I think council has always said that we wanted to use as many local companies as possible, and also that we were building this to grow into the future. So both of those are good points to mention. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Councilor Everwater and then Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. To Mr. Chant, and I guess maybe to Mr. Sentis. Now the estimated date for us to start using that building, I'm sorry if I missed that, but it'll be nice to be able to get all of our people, all of our equipment out there in one place, so that we know, we know what we have, but it'll be easier to see that and to look after that equipment. So when do you think estimated move-in date would be?
So move-in date and substantial completion date might be two different pieces, but as our project manager alluded to, we've seen a 30-day delay on substantial completion. So we were looking at the end of February, but they're looking at substantial completion being at the end of March. So in that aspect, we've also been very clear with the contractor as well, is that they could have the administration side open fairly, probably by the next 30 days while they're working on the shop. We said, we're not going to move in partially in that piece and then everybody being tripping over each other and being a huge hazard. So we said, once the full building is ready for us to move into, then they'll hand over the keys, knowing full well in the spring that there's landscaping and some gravel requirements and still plantings to happen then. But that's fairly minimal. What we are looking at is, at the end of March, depending on what the weather looks like and things like that, is that we haven't committed to a firm date of the actual, this day we're going to move in.
Yeah.
We've had to have some of those discussions with staff of that we're not going to do this over, 3 months, 4 months and stuff like that. We're going to have to pick a week, and we're just going to have to get it done.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, thanks.
Nothing worse than dragging it out forever and ever, and now you're occupying 4 different spots versus 1.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councilor Thompson, I think you had a comment or question.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was just curious. I mean, we're long past conceptual, and it sounds like we're getting close to having something really spectacular in the community. Do we have a schematic or a drawing or anything that we've made available just on our website so people can see what's coming?
We don't have it on the website. I guess we did give it to council, I guess, prior to the by-election. It had been given to council before of a basic overview of the project. But yeah, I'm not too sure the value of the schematics for the public, but we can definitely look at that and see what there is after. I guess we call it red line drawings, is that when they're complete with all of the changes that have been made, and a wall moved here and a wall moved there, that because what is conceptual sometimes and what ends up being built, there's slight modifications, right?
Understand. Thanks.
Perhaps a picture at the end would be nice. Councillor Harper.
Perhaps all they're talking about, I don't think our citizens are all that interested in the schematic drawings so much as an artist rendering of the exterior of the building,
Yeah,
what it actually is going to look like. We don't care where the bathrooms are. I know our staff do.
yeah,
So an artist rendering probably is more than appropriate.
correct. Councillor Bennett.
I believe we have.
I'm prepared to move forward with the motion.
Go ahead. Thank you.
I move to accept the update for the operational center for information.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table. Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? And that's carried 7-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Sentes, Mr. Simpson, for providing some information to us and for your presentation, Director Chen. We'll now move along to presentations and delegations. And we'll start with the Lions Club. Director Chen, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I did commit to bring back to this PMP meeting a estimate cost of what it cost the town for the snow removal over the Christmas and New Year period. If council wishes to hear that.
Sure, that would be nice. Thank you very much, Director Chen, for the reminder.
If you want to move on, I'm quite willing to move on. But I think in Director Lindemann's budget handbook, it's going to give the number anyhow. So I'll have council be aware of it. So the storm that we seen on December 23rd, and we finished up in the new year. So the total cost, estimated cost on that we pulled together is $107,800. Just shy of that, right? So that one event was $107,800 worth of that was equipment time. That doesn't include our own staff and our own equipment. We also did see just over $5,000 worth of overtime paid for that period of time as well in that aspect. So that kind of gives you an indication of doing every single street in town on a snowstorm of that event is that's what you're going to look at for an estimated cost. We'll be able to bring better numbers when we do the project update or the year-end review once all the bills have come in and knowing where we were for 2020 and then how much we've already spent in 2021. So just thought I'd give that back to council and in the public of that storm was just under $108,000 storm.
Thank you. That's a lot of snow.
It's all going to melt.
It's all going to melt. Any questions or comments for Director Chant on that? Seeing none, I don't know if we need a motion to accept that as information or not, but I will entertain a motion. Thank you, Councillor Harper.
I'll move that we accept this snow report for information.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any comments or questions, anybody? Thank you. I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that motion's carried 7-0. Thank you. Now we'll move along to presentations and delegations. And CEO Merritt, would you like to introduce or would you like to pass this on to Director Wagstaff?
I will pass it on to Director Wagstaff and let him introduce our guests for the presentation. Director Wagstaff.
Thank you. I have, not sure if I can you hear me through the mouse?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I have with us today Bob Graham and Dennis Moritz from the Lions Club, so they'll be available to ask any questions. They're going to make a couple of comments. It was presentation from the Lions typically happens on an annual basis in November or December. Of course, this year with the interruptions from COVID, not only did it interrupt the camping season, but it continued to interrupt everything through our society, which means they were a little delayed in being able to come before us so they could sort out their books for the year and have a strong understanding to what their standing is moving into 2021. I'm just going to move the camera around so that you may see our guests. So again, introducing Bob Graham. Bob, you want to give just a wave for, and Dennis Moritz? So if you do have any questions for them, certainly you can ask them. As was presented, the Lions have had a challenging year this year. We have worked, been in contact with them throughout the season, with administration and the management of the OR Hedges campground managed by the Lions. A lot of things started in early in the camping season, and again, we worked with them through the spring and summer just to be able to get through this. They have indicated that they, as they did early on, that this was going to have a financial impact for them, as both operating the campground as well as for the campground being a significant portion of their fundraising activity for the year. And of course, with the number of restrictions that were in place on events and gatherings, it had a significant impact on the ball diamonds, the activities at Olds Regional Exhibition, and therefore also the activity at the campground itself. They're going to share with us a number of things as they have in the presentation about some improvements that we had scheduled between the town and the Lions Club to be doing this past summer. Those went ahead, improvements on the washroom facility. A number of things that the town had done around tiling and the shower replacement. The Lions also took that opportunity while we had dismantled the washrooms, that they also upgraded the toilets and the urinals and some lighting. And those were costs that the Lions Club themselves had put in as inputs into the campground while we were doing the upgrades on the envelope of the building itself. As many businesses had this year, there was inspections with the fire inspector in the end of 2019. And because the campground was closing for the winter, they had until reopening in 2020 to come up to the code issues that it wasn't just they as in the Lions Club, between the Lions Club and the town, needed to address in the washroom and the campground. And those were all completed this year. As well, the Lions Club has invested in LED lighting on the lighting on the outside part of the campground itself. So they were able to do a number of improvements as well as continue to operate the campground this summer. As I said, we worked hand in hand, and there was investments both town council and the Lions Club made into the washroom facilities there to be able to continue to enhance the experience of the campers that were coming to the campground. And now I'm just going to turn it over to the gentlemen. They have a couple of comments that they wanted to make before they took any questions themselves.
Mayor and Council, this is Dennis. Yeah, just closing here, I'd just like to say that 2020 turned out to be a better year than we anticipated with all the COVID going on, and hoping that the 21 season here will be a little more prosperous. We kind of got everything organized so that we kind of know how to look after things now, and I'd just like to thank the town for their continuing cooperation, and hope we can keep the project going good. Thanks for now.
Thank you, Mr. Moritz. Mr. Graham, would you like to have a comment, or would you like to mention anything or any of the highlights that you have in your presentation?
I don't have too many additional comments to make, Mr. Mayor and councilors. Certainly appreciate your invite for us to be here today. The report covers just about everything that's happened in the year, which was short. It was a shortened year, and limitations put on the operation and the hours and everything else under meeting the requirements of the Alberta Health people. And I think we've tried to work around all that and did the very best we could do. One of the things with the peculiar year is we have accomplished a great deal at the campground, and we're certainly looking forward to having a much better year in 2021, which we're looking forward to in May. Is there any questions that you have of either of us here today?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Graham, for your presentation, and you know, and all the Lions Club does with regards to the campground. It's very much appreciated in the town. Councillor Harper.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Through you to our delegation, Mr. Mortz and Mr. Graham. Did you keep track of the number of stays that occurred at the campground as compared to other years? I believe that in the end, camping became quite popular because it was the one thing that people could do. And I know that people were looking for places to camp last year. So did they choose Olds?
Well, I think I don't know if we were at the top of the list for people camping, but there was just the brakes were put on so many activities, not only sports related and activities associated with the Ag Society, and but also even anniversaries and weddings, things that in past years have resulted in families coming, you know, for 3, 4 days, 5 days, whatever, and utilizing the campground for different occasions. But even some of those things were put on hold this year with the pandemic that we're dealing with. We did have a couple of work parties that were staying there by the month, and that certainly was it added to the resolving the financial crisis that we were in for the year. I don't know if we're going to have those same monthly people back next year or not, but we're hoping that the year will start on schedule this coming year, and if the sports activities return and the Ag Society has some functions, it should be a positive thing for the campground.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Any other comments or questions for the delegation?
And may I share, Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Director Wagstaff.
So some information that the gentlemen have shared as well is that the Lions Club annual year is from June till June of each year.
Mm-hmm.
And so the start of each camping season gets collected in their previous year's financials. But from June 2019 to June 2020, the Lions Club itself donated $51,000 to 39 different projects. And that's their donations summary. So that just gives you an idea of the impact that their activity is having within community events and community groups beyond the Lions themselves. And this year, you know, we worked with them, understanding that they were going to be in some financial challenges for them this year, and so we waived, as council had waived their lease for this year, And they've been very gracious as we met with them all the way along to indicate that that helped them out so that they can get through to continue to be able to meet some of the obligations that they had from their savings towards supporting these other community groups to be able to get through this tough summer, and that it allows them to continue to move forward, make some improvements in the campground, and still meet their donation commitments that they've made to other groups.
Thank you, Director Wagstaff. I know that all of council is appreciative of all the work that the Lions Club does in town, and not just for the campgrounds, but all the other projects they do in the parks and things like that. So thank you very much to both you gentlemen, and pass that information along to your members, that we certainly do appreciate all your hard work. Any other questions? Can I get a motion then, please? Thank you, Member Zizka.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that we accept the Lions OR Hedge Campground Annual Report for information.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or concerns before we take the vote? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that motion's carried 7-0. Thank you very much. And we appreciate you guys coming in and providing the information to council. Okay, we'll move along then to, next is Restrictive Covenants from Craig Teal. Mr. Mayor, would you like to introduce, please?
Yes, thanks so much, Deputy Mayor. Craig Teal here is from Parkland Community Planning Services. From time to time, the issue of restricted covenants comes into play, and there are questions about it. This past year, or 2020, a number of questions have risen in regards to restricted covenants on properties. And Mr. Teal is here to give a presentation on what restricted covenants are, what municipalities can do about it, what the public or the owners can do about it, and things of that nature. So unless Mr. Kent has anything to say, I'll hand the floor over to Mr. Teal to give an explanation on his paper on restricted covenants, to give enlighten us what restricted covenants is all about.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So I'll hand it over to Craig. Nothing further to add other than having this in front of council today for a good discussion point.
Thank you. And Mr. Teal.
Thank you, Chair Ryan, members of council, Senior Vin, good afternoon. I don't have a formal presentation. I'm going to be working off of the materials that you have in your agenda pack. So hopefully that works for everyone. Michael introducing his comments, the issue has come up from time to time and over the course of the last year. Certainly restricted covenants have been in the town of Olds for several years, but it seems timely to take a look at a little bit more in depth. What are these restricted covenants? What kind of job do they do? How are they structured? And looking ahead in terms of what are some of the implications for the municipality in terms of getting involved in restricted covenants. So they're in short order, a restrictive covenant is in essence a private contract for how someone deals with or develops and uses their property. It's kind of like a private planning system compared to our public planning system under the land use bylaw and development permits that most of us are much more familiar with. So a restrictive covenant is a contract that limits one party, one owner of property from doing something, and it's usually imposed by either a previous owner or another owner of property in the area nearby. Just by way of trivia, across Canada, Alberta has a distinctive place of using restrictive covenants the most across all the provinces. It's very much kind of a common law tool that comes out of the British system, but very much also used heavily in the American planning system. So some of you may be familiar with these, such as they're used to put in place architectural controls to limit how your house is developed and the appearance of it. Others you may be familiar with are ones that deal with competition issues. So I'm selling my grocery store, my lot next door to my grocery store, and I may put a restriction on there that the future owner can never set up a competing grocery store to go toe to toe with me or be right next door. So those are the kind of things that a restrictive covenant can cover off. They're intended to limit or direct how someone else uses their property. At the bottom part of the page, you can see a very rudimentary assessment of, if you were to prepare one, what are the legal expectations you have to do to get past land titles to be able to put one on title. So it does touch on the very quickly 4 different items. One, there must be a property that is restricted or subject to the conditions, and that's commonly referred to as a servient tenement. Sorry. The second is the parcel that benefits, and that's called the dominant tenement. There has to be at least one negative restriction. So you can say it in a positive way, but you can't ask them to do something. You have to basically restrict something so that it works, that a court can order an injunction that prevents you from doing an action. And that's why you have to have at least one restrictive or negative covenant on the property. It has to deal with the land. It can't deal with non-related like chattel or individuals or persons. It's about the use of the land. There must be some direct link. And either through the actual text or through reading between the lines and the implication, it's meant to actually run with the land. In other words, it stays on the property and binds heirs and successors going forward. Even restrictive covenants are a complex tool, and even in looking at land titles materials, there's a very basic screening before one of these documents gets put on title, but even land title staff would not get into the legal mechanics of any individual restrictive covenant. They leave that one to the lawyers and the clerks, or sorry, the courts. Who's controlling the agenda page?
I believe that's Mr. Fox, is it not?
Okay, great. So we're on to page number 2. So the people that write restrictive covenants are not municipal staff. And the content is set out by a developer if they wish to put one on their subdivision as they're creating it, or a private property owner before they sell their property could create one, sometimes with the help of the lawyer, sometimes the help of the consultant. And the content is not subject to any municipal regulation or requirement. So a developer creating a restrictive covenant does not have to come into the development officer to get permission to put in a certain clause. This happens very much outside the municipality. Occasionally, as you're doing a new subdivision design or neighborhood approval, a developer may ask for input, but it's exactly that. It's input only. It's not mandatory that municipal consent is given on the structure and the content of these documents. In terms of enforcement, it's a 2-stage approach. So first up, we have the party that may wish to pursue enforcement. So usually it's anyone that is one that have to be a party to the agreement by name, or they actually have to own one of the dominant tenements. So if 20 people are party to a restrictive covenant and 10 of them are dominant tenants, any one of the 10 dominant tenements can choose to enforce against one of the servient tenants if they feel that there's a breach. Now, by choose to enforce, I mean they can choose to take the matter to a judge. Because at the end of the day, the only enforcement mechanism that is in place is an order by the court, an injunction to stop an action, or amendments to the actual restrictive covenant. But at the end of the day, the decision on whether or not there's been a breach or whether or not there's going to be a penalty comes from the judge, not the person of the dominant tenement. Consequences, we can briefly skip over that. If you did something you weren't supposed to on your property and you got called out on it, and the court ruled against you under restrictive covenant, you may be taking something off your property, paying a bunch of legal bills, and restoring the property back to where it was. So there can be consequences. A violation, if it's successfully held up in court, you're defying a court order, which has its own serious implications if you fail to come into compliance. We scroll on to the next page, please. Okay, so are they editable? Can they be changed? Can you get rid of these things? How long do they stay on the property? And there's basically three ways you can do all of those with restrictive covenants. One is if all the people that own the dominant tenements get together and all agree, they can do what's called an amending agreement, submit that to land titles, and change the terms and conditions of the restrictive covenant. If they don't, one party who feels that it should be changed could go get a court order from a judge to see if the terms of a restricted covenant can be modified. And you can see on the screen in front of you that there is a test that goes through. But at the end of the day, the judge is asked to see whether or not the changes are beneficial to the person that originally had the restriction on the property. It's not necessarily a whole scale wipe the slate clean. In particular, when you see item number 2, that it's contrary to the provisions of the land use bylaw, that doesn't mean that it's wiped out because we put in place a land use bylaw clause that says don't use them. That clause is for any direct clashes or conflict, such as a restrictive covenant that tells people they can only build an accessory building that has a minimum height of 20 feet when the land use bylaw only allows permits to be issued for 15 feet. That may be grounds for a judge to intervene. But at the end of the day, whether or not there is a change or modification is at the discretion of the court. In the middle of the page, you see the expiration. And sometimes, depending on how unrestricted covenant has been written, the developer lawyer may have put in a sunset clause. We've seen actually 2 examples in Olds which have 99-year sunset clauses, which is a little shorter than my 2150, but you get the general idea. 2150 is a lot shorter than forever. In the absence of sunset clause, that's what it runs for. So for a municipality specifically, are you obligated to enforce these or obligated to follow them? And this is where we have to make a distinction between the municipality's regulatory hat and your hat as a landowner. So under the regulatory hat, no, municipality is under no obligation to enforce a restricted covenant. Under the landowner hat, if the municipality was a party to the agreement, say one of the dominant tenants, then they have all the rights and privileges of any other property owner, which would include the ability to call out one of the other property owners for failure to comply with the restricted covenant. However, they would have to go get the court order. So you have to remember there's regulatory hat versus landowner hat, very different. Municipalities can use restricted covenants. So if, as a property owner, you still have that privilege as just like anyone else. If the town wanted to restrict something in addition to their land use bylaw requirements or any other tools they may have available to them. So I'm going to pause there, Madam Chairman. That's kind of the background on what it's all about, and just see if there's any questions, or if it went too fast, we have to circle back on anything.
No.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Till, for your presentation, and we do have the full package in the agenda package. Councilor Overwater, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. So Mr. Teal, for example, one of the subdivisions in the town of Olds, they do have a restricted covenant on it, and it talks about fences. And I mean, it also talks about no businesses and so on and so forth. However, with discussions with the developer who has developed the property and has long gone, has stated, it's turned over to the town. Well, the town doesn't enforce the restricted covenant. However, basically to me, these restricted covenants, all they do is they pit neighbors against neighbors. And I really don't know if there is a way that the town can stop developers from having restricted covenants on it, because if you want to get it released, then, or if you have a problem with the neighbor that's doing something, for example, putting up a fence and they're not supposed to, all you're doing is pitting those neighbors against neighbors. And so, and the developer doesn't want anything to do with it. So then what do you do?
Okay. All those things that you mentioned, I think there are all a good half of them are part of attachment B in terms of what could go wrong or what are the challenges from some of these tools. Your options on how to correct are very limited. So starting with the first one, can you prevent them from being created? The answer is no. They're not subject to municipal control. They're a private matter. The person doing a subdivision does not need the subdivision authority's sign off to attach that to all the lots. We also don't get any say on the content. Unless they expressly state in the text, they do not automatically roll over to the town for enforcement. And then even if one did, then the question for the town would be, do you want to be enforcing? Will be yet another challenge. In terms of making changes to them, one of two things would have to happen. Either a court order is achieved to get it completely struck down or altered. That's one way. Or everyone that's party to that particular agreement, so if it's 50 landowners, then you need 50 individuals to consent to the changes, and one person that holds out on that would be able to hold up the entire process of filing an amending agreement to change the nature of the text.
May I have a supplemental?
Is there anybody else with any questions right at the moment? All right, go ahead, Councilor Wood.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, so even if there is a restricted covenant, are real estate agents, when they're buying and selling homes, are they in the know of a restricted covenant, and are they obligated to tell the purchaser and the buyer that there's a restricted covenant? And if the buyer buys it and just goes ahead and does whatever they want anyway and leave it up to the rest of the people in that area to take them to task. That's basically what you're saying.
Okay, I think there were some questions in there.
Yep.
So just quite a few packed together.
Sorry.
Okay, so the first up, is it visible? Can you find it if you know what you're looking for? The answer is yes. So restrictive covenant is registered on land titles. If someone, typically your lawyer, is working for you in your due diligence to purchase property, I think your realtor may also help out. I think if there's only one realtor involved, I always get lost on this one. Their obligation is to the seller, not the buyer, I think. Lawyer, realtor, person doing their own research is able to check the title, find a restrictive covenant, and actually pull up the document using land title system, and then you'll be able to read. Whether or not you can understand the full nature of what you're reading without the assistance of your lawyer, that's another matter. So there's a couple people that should be able to help the buyer. If you go ahead knowingly and buy that property, well, at least you did that with your eyes open. And if you violate the restrictive covenant knowingly and take your risks, then that's exactly what you're doing. The neighboring municipality or neighbors may or may not seek to enforce against you by going to a judge. You may or not win, may or may not win in front of the judge. So there are some risks and downside. I think what we found is a lot of people, they're not familiar with the tool, and a lot of people aren't. And their first stop is typically the municipal office, because everything in development related must be regulated through the town office. And that's just easier to stop in and visit there. Fair enough, it's open local government, it's supposed to be doing that sort of thing, compared to calling your lawyer and getting them to help out. So people starting to do their research, it's very common for them to show up at the planning and development desk. I think I missed some of your question.
It's okay. I think at the end of the day, you know what? The municipality has nothing to do with it, and the homeowner or purchaser either goes ahead and does whatever they want and take their chances if the rest in the community decide to take them to task.
I'm not sure if I threw the realtors under the bus on that one.
No, I didn't throw the realtors under the bus.
I meant more in my answer, but.
Okay. I mean, I got a realtor sitting in front of me. I'm not going to throw her under the bus.
Any other? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Till, for the responses. Any other questions or comments? Well, go ahead, CEO.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight on page 64 of the report, under questionable legal structure, the last sentence basically indicates that it's at the municipality's peril if they get involved with the restricted covenants.
Mm-hmm.
Then the liability could be put on us. As Craig indicated, there's two ways we'd be involved, being the homeowner or the regulator. If we're the regulator and we try to interfere, we could end up being involved with the legal.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Harper.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and thank you very much, Mr. Till, for the very informative discussion on and handout on restrictive covenants. I believe the developers want to have restrictive covenants on their properties when they build the new residential subdivisions or even commercial strip malls. Because it's to their benefit as well as the benefit of all those people who purchase in there. They're guaranteed a type of standard beyond what the municipality wants for design and build. So it's makes for very attractive subdivisions.
Thank you. I do have a, I don't know, a question or comment, whether you classify it as one or the other, but I do think that there's some reasons for a restrictive covenant on the developer side, because you do control the aesthetics of a community, of a subdivision they're developing, and it's to the benefit to keep it at a high standard for both the buyer and the developer. The problem comes in is when you resell these homes and 10 or 15 or 20 years down the road, and you've got a 99-year covenant in place. By the time you've already on your third buyer, they don't even know that there's a restricted covenant in place, and then they start to make changes, and then that's where you end up having neighbor against neighbor with regards to that, unless you're very well aware as the buyer of the property, or the seller is providing you that information, or the realtor. You may not even be aware that there's restricted covenants in place until you do something that angers somebody else. Councillor Harper.
Just in a reply to that, as Mr. Teal said, it's a buyer's due diligence. Restrictive covenants are always registered on title. They're there for anybody to seek and discover.
I agree, but 20, 30 years down the road, a lot of people are looking at that thoroughly, Councillor Harper, and that's where you end up having, not you, but the royal you. People have problems down the road. Thank you very much, Mr. Teal, for providing this information, because it's good material for council to know, even though the municipality really doesn't have a say in the restrictive covenants. Okay, any other comments or concerns, questions?
Before we move on,
Yes.
Madam Chairman, maybe we should.
Yes.
The other part of the report was about any direction council may have on follow-up. And I'm getting the sense that it's, thanks for the information, no follow-up.
Anybody who would like to speak to that? CEO Merritt.
I found this document very informative on restricted covenants. It's an issue with all municipalities. It was a huge issue in the city of Edmonton, I think about 12, 13 years ago, dealing more with businesses. I think this would be a good document to place on our website and the planning and development section. And we can easily refer homeowners to that. It would be nice for them, people looking to buy in the town of Olds, to basically see this document. I think it very well explains the whole issue and the various topics that are dealt with in a restricted covenant. So I'm going to encourage us to put this on our website.
Thank you. I agree. That's a very, very informative. Councillor Blatz, you had a question.
Well, I was just actually going to say, if there was not, I agree with what Mr. Merritt has said, and I found this to be very valuable information that we've received today. And I agree, I would like to see it put onto our website, and even maybe some type of a link either in one of our Did You Knows or even in one of our newsletters, if there's room to say the link is there and where it's available for our citizens. And I think that might eliminate some confusion and question going forward. And I didn't know if we were going to be asking any more questions or if we should call the vote or call for a motion to accept for information.
I was just going to do that, except I think Mayor Majishka had his hand up. No, you're okay? Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Teal, did you have anything else?
Nothing from me, Madam Chairman.
Okay, I'll ask for a motion then. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. I would like to thank Craig Teal for this information and for presenting it to us today. I really believe it's a very valuable document and some good background information. And I move that we accept for information this report on restrictive covenants.
Thank you, Councillor Blatz. Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that motion is carried 7-0. Before we go on to the rest of the agenda, I'd like to take a 7.5-minute break.
Oh, wow.
I'll call for a break. So we'll be right back. And what time is it? 3:14. Say 3:22. Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right. And we're back. All right, so we will move along now to business arising, which there is none, I see, unless anybody has anything. Business arising from the minutes or unfinished business? Seeing none, I'll move along to bylaws. Bylaw 2021-01, land use bylaw 01-23 amendment, murals. And Mr. Merritt, CAO, who would like to speak to this?
I'll just start off. Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. The presentation today on our bylaw changes or amendments to the bylaw on murals has come after a public consultation. We had quite a reaction from our public. Hopefully we're able to address the points that our public were trying to make. For the most part, there was a commonality to it, but there was some differences as well. So with that, the team has got together to make changes to our land use planning bylaw. Craig Teal, again, will be with us, and he'll lead us through those suggested changes that have been made to address some of the issues that were raised in the consultation engagement process that we had followed. I'll ask Director Chant if he wishes to speak to this before, or even and Director Wagstaff, or we'll just get right into the presentation from Mr. Teal. Seeing Mr. Chant shake his head, no. I think we can move right into the presentation from Mr. Teal.
Okay. Mr. Teal.
Thank you, Chair Ryan. We'll follow through the agenda package again, if Sean can bring that up on the screen. And just in terms of a quick overview, the material I'm going to walk through with you in terms of the draft bylaw seeks to isolate murals as a separate use so that we can regulate it specifically. It seeks to treat that as a discretionary use in commercial, industrial, and recreational districts. So that's how we direct where it would be within the community. So not allowing on a residential building within a residential district. It looks at process in terms of who's making the decision. In this particular case, the draft puts that to Municipal Planning Commission, but builds in a role for the town's Public Art Advisory Committee to assist the Municipal Planning Commission in their function. And finally, we're going to be touching on what kind of process steps or application expectations we need to put in place. Sorry, not quite finally, for the development permit process to go through. And now finally, what are the specific expectations for murals? So the draft bylaw is before council because in essence, it is your amendment to the land use bylaw. So it's a little different than the landowner initiated amendment that would go very quickly through first reading. So that's why it's before PMP for discussion. In terms of the actual content, if we can scroll to page 69. Thank you very much. So the first 5 sections that are in the bylaw talk about definition and making sure that the definition that we're inserting for murals is distinct from sign and whether or not we need super graphics anymore. Decisions or suggestions we don't need it. So that's what you're seeing on 1 through 5. So mural is a definition. It means a picture, scene, graphic, or diagram displayed on the exterior wall or surface of a building for the primary purpose of decoration or artistic expression, and not created to solely display a commercial message or depiction. So public regulation, we're on the exterior of the buildings, we're in that public space. It's not whether or not you're allowed to have a nice fresco in your living room or interior space. It's very much about the exterior of the building in terms of the land use bylaw regulation. We had to modify the definition of sign to make sure that it doesn't overlap. And signs would continue to be regulated separately. So basically the change there is to two things: pull the definition of sign into the body of the definitions in land use bylaw, but more expressly to state that it is except a mural. So excluding murals out from that definition. And then we have sign definition appearing twice in the bylaw. That's why you see two definitions being modified. Sometimes a little bit of redundancy is helpful. The term super graphics, which was kind of trying to do the job before for murals, really wasn't up to snuff. So we're suggesting that that term be dropped out of the bylaw completely. And that also means we have another definition for a type of sign that has a direct reference to super graphics. So we have to amend that definition. So that's really what 1 through 5 are doing, is to make sure that we're defining the term in a way that allows us to set up the regulation. Items 6 and 7 then go into some of that regulation. Where are murals going to be allowed? So we're talking about adding them to the list of allowable uses as discretionary. So discretionary use, one means it goes to municipal planning commission unless otherwise directed in the land use bylaw. And discretionary use also means that it's not an automatic approval if you meet all the requirements. Context still matters. So the development authority could still say you met all the requirements, but we just don't think it's appropriate on this particular site. And that's what allows for the use of discretionary use. The districts that we selected come from some of the public feedback, indicating that there was a level of comfort with this form of development being found within an industrial and commercial, highway or commercial, or downtown, uptown commercial areas. Maybe on some of the recreation facility areas and like a big sports field, and sometimes some of our direct control districts include that industrial and commercial component. It specifically keeps the murals out of the vast majority of the residential areas, with the exceptions showing up in clause number 7. So within some of our residential districts, we may actually have a school or a large community hall or a place of worship, and they may or may not choose to have a mural. So that's what the suggested exceptions for that. But you would not be able to go paint or your neighbor wouldn't be able to go paint their garage door as a mural under the proposed changes that we're suggesting. So some of the wherever there is public and quasi-public use, you see that some of the larger lot residential districts do allow for those. So for instance, there's a number of places of worship going north on 57th, just on the way up to the hospital on the west side of the road, that fall within residential districts, even though they're institutional and places of worship. So the next part that we have in the draft bylaw is dealing with the specific rules around murals. So the easiest way to put this in the bylaw was to create its own separate schedule that would come in right after the signs section. And then signs we regulated under Schedule D. Murals, if you meet the definition, we're going to regulate you under Schedule D1. So the first area that's talked about is the application process, and it is unique for murals. So it still includes whatever form the development officer has created to help process these types of applications. We do need to know people's names. We have to know who the lawful owner of the property is. We want people to tell us where the mural will be located. How does it fit on the building? Give us a site plan showing its general location. The more interesting things that are very unique are when you start looking at items F and G. If you're proposing to do a mural, I don't think it's unreasonable for you to have a mock-up of the content and what you plan to put on a larger scale if approved. So showing the colors, indicating whether or not the mural will be illuminated, yes or no. If it is illuminated, how are you doing that? G, providing F, III, telling us about how you will fix a mural to a building. Will be painted right on? Is it on a big sheet of plywood? Is it on a bunch of styrofoam panels that we're going to crazy glue on? That kind of information. G, an explanation of the intent, motivation, overall message that is meant to be conveyed by the mural. So written art, a statement to that effect. Certainly something we don't ask for from signs. And then we also always have H, which is quite popular with staff. If we're missed anything, the development officer can still ask for any additional information that's necessary to help process the permit. that's how we get the information that we need. We have another process related step. That once an application for a mural comes in, to be deemed complete, the applicant is going to have to provide written confirmation that their mural, specifically maybe the detailed illustration and the written artist statement, has been reviewed with the Public Art Advisory Committee, and that they have given feedback that the content of the mural is acceptable. So there's a kind of a built-in role there for the committee, and I understand they know this is coming and are willing to take on that role to assist the development officer in providing a recommendation to Municipal Planning Commission, who ultimately would make the decision. So what that clause means is if it takes 30 to 45 days for the applicant's materials to go over to the PA's, the Public Arts Advisory Committee, to do the review, the clock to process the development permit hasn't started yet because it's not deemed complete, and then until they come back with that written confirmation. After that's come back, it's like any other development permit. The municipality only has 40 days to process it, after which, if no decision is forthcoming, then the applicant can exercise their appeal rights. Okay, so we've talked about the definition, where it can be placed, and what kind of application process will be unique for murals. Section 3 starts talking about the general provisions. So between Municipal Planning Commission and maybe the Public Art Advisory Committee as well, what is a town looking for in a mural? Or the reverse, what are you not prepared to see in a mural? To basically make a decision on whether or not it should be approved, yes or no. So under item number 1, our starting point will be 1 mural per building. It's not to say that you can't come in and propose a set of 3, just suggesting we start with 1. The tail end of that clause says the development authority still has the ability to grant approval for more than 1. Again, if it depends on context, is it appropriate? So number 2 talks about where the mural and the size of it would be placed and how the construction material, what kind of construction materials will be used. Number 3 talks about the relationship of the mural to our historically significant elements of buildings. Sometimes it depends whether or not you're dealing with a heritage or historically significant building, or a building that has interesting architectural features. So going to an Edwardian commercial building that has nice windows in the front and replacing those with a big billboard or type or a sheet of plywood with a mural on it probably wouldn't be the greatest in terms of the impact on the architectural features that contribute to the appearance of that building. Maybe there's another part of the building where the mural may be more appropriate that is otherwise just blank bricks or another finishing feature. The mural number 4 starts doubling up as meant to be a painting or decorative work. It's not meant to be a commercial messaging. Number 5, it may be a requirement that the mural content be reflective of the town's history or heritage. That's not a mandatory, it's a may. Number 6 recognizes that even though graffiti is not allowed and can't just be a bunch of text in your mural, there probably is still going to be a little bit of text. It could be a reference to a Coke or Ford or some other thing, but it's not meant to be a big ad for a commercial business or have a lot of text. Number 7 starts getting into some of the specific items that would be considered inappropriate in a mural. And I think rather than going through them, probably they do stand for themselves. The common theme is if it runs the risk of potentially offending or creating divisiveness within the community, it probably shouldn't be a mural available for public viewing on the exterior of a private building. Number 8, again, this is an encouragement to have a link to historical events. It's not mandatory, but there's a series of items there that could be used to help build the theme of the mural that you wish to add to your building. Number 9, specific to lighting. If it's not to say that all murals have to be lit, but if you choose to light one up, we're concerned about any spillover lighting. Try to direct it to the murals or the parts of the building that have to be lit. And number 10 goes to the issue of the maintenance, both in terms of ongoing of the mural. So the development enforcement mechanism links back to properties. It's very difficult for us to track down original artists. So the owner of the building becomes responsible for the mural. 5 years later on, if it's looking a little bit faded, it's up to the owner and whatever arrangement they made with the original artist or original group that commissioned it to do a touch-up or maintain the mural in that respect. So that includes keeping it properly painted, keeping it clean, and if there's a structural element that supports a mural, making sure that that's still intact and the mural is safely affixed to where it's supposed to be. So with that, Madam Chair, happy to field any questions about the draft bylaw.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Teal. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. I just really want clarity on section 2, where we are discussing the process with the development officer determines all the information and passes it on to the PAC, the Public Art Advisory Committee. And then it will come back to the Municipal Planning Commission for subsequent approval, I guess. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, did I misunderstand? But I thought PAC was going to bring recommendations to council. And so that would be included in this process as well, correct? Like it would go from the development officer to PAC, PAC would come to town council, then town council would approve, then it would go back to the Municipal Planning Commission, and then the development permit would be granted. Is that correct? Do I understand that, or did I totally get that wrong?
We certainly didn't structure it that way in the draft that you're seeing. I think your first interpretation of the path was correct. The development officer would direct the applicant, if they haven't already done so, to take the materials over to the PAC, get the feedback. The feedback would come back to the development officer. The development officer then has to say, well, I'm not the decision-making authority. I have to prepare my package, put it on the agenda, take it to the Municipal Planning Commission, and that Municipal Planning Commission would make the decision. That's the process that's on the paper in front of you. Certainly, if it was to go to council, I guess we haven't really delved into what exactly would happen on the PAC, sorry, the Public Art Advisory Committee side, and exactly what process they would use. And I'm not sure if Mr. Wagstaff has anything to add on that point. That's kind of my 30-second warning for him. If we were to make the final decision rest with council, we'd have to make sure that council literally delegates yourself as a development authority for these types of permits.
Okay, Councillor Overwater, then Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. That was my understanding as well too, Councillor Blatz, that it would go to the Public Advisory Committee, and then they in turn would bring it to council for council's approval. I'm thinking that's how we thought this was going to happen. The rest of council, I'd like to hear what you guys have to say, because I don't think Councillor Blatz and I are the only two that heard it that way.
No, and I concur. Councillor Harper.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Councillor Harper.
My impression was that the Public Art Advisory Committee would just recommend for murals, would make a recommendation to the Municipal Planning Commission. And then it would be the MPC that would make that decision. PAC, under the terms of reference, makes recommendations to council for public art work. And I don't believe that murals would come under that because they're private. Because they're private.
No.
Okay.
So,
continue.
Well,
Just hang on one sec. Councillor Thompson, if you're finished, Councillor Harper.
Yes.
Councillor Thompson, and then Director Wagstaff, you had a comment before I get back to you, Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I too, I'm confused by the path here that's being taken. And when we, under 2B, under Schedule D1, 2B that is, we have the Public Arts Advisory Committee deeming whether the content is acceptable. Yet it's very clear what the content exceptions are or are not within the general provisions. So why are they using that process? Is there a different set of standards that will be added, or is it the same standard vetted by two different groups?
Director Wagstaff, would you like to speak to this?
My understanding to the process is that the MPC has been designated the authority, which that can change as Mr. Teal has indicated in the language. But by being the designated authority from council, that advice that the Public Art Advisory Committee is providing council is going to its designated authority, being the MPC. That's how I understood the process was going to technically work. With regards to Councillor Thompson's question about the content, they're not going to make a decision. They are going to provide their advice about the content of the art so that MPC has that expertise available to them, because the individuals that we have recruited and the other expertise that they can bring in are going to be very specific to art and artwork. And yes, even though they might be publicly held, they are still considered to be public art because it is a space under the definitions of what public art is. It can still be on a private piece of property, but it's deemed public art because it can be seen by the greater public.
Correct. Councillor Blatz and then Councillor Bennett, I believe you had your hand up, and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Thank you, Director Wagstaff, for that input. I guess my question more will be then, if we want to have, this seems like a convoluted process perhaps, and I think maybe, you know, this is something that I think we really need to review again, because council has taken the stance that we are not opposed to murals at all. And we've said it over and over and over again, contrary to popular belief. But I think as if that is the process, that it would go to the development officer, who would advise them to come to PAC, then PAC has to come to council, then council obviously has provided the Municipal Planning Commission with the authority to deal with it. That's fine, but I think then we need to make sure that it's not going to be drawn out for 4 or 5 months, because we only have a window of opportunity to be painting in our country, and you know, that's a few months in the summertime. That's ideal. So I think that we really need to review this and discuss exactly what options we want to do in the process we want to follow. I don't want to see it become a convoluted, long drawn out process for folks. Yes. That's just my comment. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blatz. I concur. Director Wagstaff, you had something, and then we'll go to Councillor Thompson.
So to that, the process is set up to have some time to have that reflection made, so that it was intentional, so that we weren't going to be having on the whim, someone paints something on a whim and goes up. It was intended to have to show that in order to get artwork completed and done well, and the ones that have gone up, there was lots of pre-planning that had occurred to those 2 particular murals, where the artist had gone through. What it didn't have included in that process was this vetting process, you know, through the town. So now we have included the town in that same process that would ensure that, you know, the artists have done some, you know, background work to ensure that whomever is you know, sponsoring or financially backing that piece of work, that some thought and due process has gone into it. The 2 that did go up had that thought and due process. There was lots of time prior to them actually going out and painting to ensure that that artwork was done and done well from an artistic point of view. Now we want to make sure that the town is part of that process when it comes to public art.
Thank you, Director Wagstaff. That gives me some clarification. I appreciate that.
And to try to be succinct, there is, yes, developing of art takes time, and the process we wanted to build in, so there is that reflection piece in time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, Councillor Water, and then Director Chant has a comment.
Yeah, so my comment through yourself to Director Wagstaff, and just for clarity. So in 2B, if the Public Art Advisory Committee was reviewing so there are different ways to apply paint and art, and I don't understand it all myself. That would make sense if they were reviewing the type of artistry that's going in. But I question whether we need to have a content piece at 2B and then a content piece at 3.8. I would rather, sorry, 3.7 and 8. I'm questioning whether we've gone a little farther. Love the process, love the thought process that goes into this, but wonder if we're too bureaucratic in this space.
As I had read that connection between 2B, where the proposed mural and deem the content to be acceptable, they're using the sections in 3 to make that determination. And so that's not, it is from an artistic perspective, as we've empowered PAAC to be able to give that advice to council and its, by extension, its designated authority in the MPC, to provide that background based off of the criteria that are set out in section 3.
Okay. So if that's a direct link, that makes more sense to me.
Councilor Overwater.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Two things. I like the PAC going to the MPC also, because the PAC is not only 2 councillors on there, there's artists that are on that committee. And when it goes to MPC, there's also public at large on that committee too. So it to a certain degree, it takes the onus off, council being the only ones that approve that art. Number 7 of 3.7. I guess I have concerns about some of the stuff that is not allowed. I mean, the first one, number A, full or partial human nudity. I mean, when anybody travels anywhere in the world, there's all kinds of different artistic modes out there, whether they're sculptures or whether they're paintings. And I feel that, nudity done in a certain degree can be quite beautiful. And so, I guess I think we really need to kind of stop and think about some of the stuff that we're saying we will not allow, because who are we to say, nudity's ugly? It shouldn't be up there. It's offensive to some. Well, I mean, look at our rocks on Highway 27. Some people find, some of that stuff offensive, and they've made some very awful comments about them, but other people absolutely love them. So, art really is in the eye of the beholder, and I don't want to restrict ourselves too much when we get to saying what the content should be. So just my comments on that.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Overwater. And all you have to do is look at David and understand that it could be any kind of art. Director Chant, you had a comment, and then I'm going to go to the CEO Merritt.
Thank you through the chair. And I guess when we looked at this process and having the, going to public art advisory prior to being a complete application, is time can be, as Councilor Betts talked about, we don't want this taking too long. But if we go through if the application has gone to the development officer and then it goes to the PAC as part of the process, time becomes our enemy. Is we only have 40 days to deem as complete. So the longer you want to tread that out to where that process is all of a sudden you get to that 40-day mark. If a decision isn't made, it is already deemed approved. Craig can probably give a lot more context about that. So we really struggled. We deemed refused.
Yep.
Okay, so we really struggled with that process on making sure that time was not our enemy when an application came in front of us. So that's where we put it, as it wouldn't be deemed complete until you've already got that all of that stuff put together from the public art advisory. So we have those times to meet those MPC meetings once a month, in order that we don't get away from us on the timeline. Mr. Steele will probably be able to have a better explanation than I did, but time was not our friend on this one at some points.
Yes, that could happen for sure. CEO Merritt, you had a comment. You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, just want to reiterate the process that we conceived here is that basically the development officer is going to make sure all the details are included. So when it's submitted, the development officer will ensure the addresses, the right statistical information is provided. Then the development officer will hand it off to the PAC. That may be the issue that we're speaking to, is that how much time does the PAC have to look at this? It can't be 3 months to do it. So we may have to define that the PAC has to be called within 30 days to basically review a mural once the development officer has moved it forth. And then from that, that's why we have a PAC, is basically to give us advice on artistic. And I agree with Councillor Overwater by having nudity removed. Whatever, we're taking some of the powers away from the PAC to give advice on this is very artistic and should be moved forward to take to the approval process. And just to counter this, because there's been a mixed discussion, we thought it would be appropriate that it would go to MPC to make the final decision in regards to this. So basically, council through the two members of the committee are having some influence, but we do have the artistic impression being from the PAC. Development officer will then move it on to PAC once they get that. So that's how Craig has formulated that with the executive team to take what we heard from the engagement and bring it into a process that's timely. So maybe that's the one issue, is how many days does the PAC get to do it? After that, it's brought back to the development officer. It's a 40-day countdown.
Okay. Thank you, CEO Merritt. Okay, Member Zizka, I'm going to let you go first. Councilor Thompson, he has not had a chance to say anything first. So Member Zizka, and then you, Councilor Thompson, and then Councilor Overwater. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I love the process all the way through, and it's the fact that the 40-day time limit doesn't start ticking until PAC's had a chance to look at it. I think that's a great thing. I would support removing 7A, the full or partial nudity. I think the PAC would certainly be able to section out anything that's inappropriate or anything like that that goes along with the nudity. I mean, art is always in the eye of the beholder, so you're never going to get full consensus on something that's beautiful or artistic. So I think we've gone to painstaking issue to put a very broad range of people, counselors, artists, Indigenous folks, and the like into that PAC, and we've entrusted them to make these decisions. So I'm in full support of removing 7A and full support of the general process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Thompson.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor. My last comment is the use of the word shall in 3.8. Murals shall be encouraged to have a linkage to. I would like to see that be may. I think sometimes we focus on certain topics like history and such, and I'd like it to be a may comment to allow for a greater variety of art.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Overwater.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Number one, the PAC committee can meet at any time. It's not a monthly meeting. It's a meeting called when there is a mural, issue that has come up. So it's not like it's a set date that it meets. So it can meet anytime. And MPC, as far as I know, Mr. Chant has met on other occasions besides the third Thursday of each month when there is something that needs a decision on sooner than later. So, I mean, I think those two things are fluid, they can happen at any time. And I also have a question on 7G, where it says graffiti and street art. So are we classifying when the the high school students came and wanted to paint the rainbow sidewalk. Is that also what we're classifying as street art? If so, then, I mean, that does, you know, in some communities, it's a very divisive issue. Black Lives Matters, we've seen rallies, protests. So, I mean, I think we got to be careful as to what we're putting in there. That, so I think we need to really, I don't know, watch what we put into that 3.7, because, you know, we might get ourselves into a bit of trouble. So.
Thank you. Councillor Blatz.
Oh,
you lost your video.
Disappeared.
Blatz, you're on mute too.
She totally disappeared.
I think now you're still on
So
mute.
sorry, some notification showed up and I tried to get rid of it and I just got rid of everything. My apologies.
No problem.
First of all, I just want to make it clear that I'm not opposed about this. I just wanted clarification on what the process would be and what the timelines would be to ensure that, you know, we make people, our citizens, aware. Secondly, number 8, going back to Councillor Thompson's comment about murals shall and changing that to may. I think part of the reason for this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you happen to look at the Uptown Olds area redevelopment plan, they were very, very clear in what they wanted to see done with murals and such and artwork and improving that uptown area structure plan. So I think leaving shall kind of gives this group the opportunity to maintain those areas that have already designated what they're going to be doing. That would be up to those committees, I think, to come forward and have that changed. Now, if I'm off base, someone please correct me, but I would prefer to see murals shall be encouraged to have linkage at this point in time. And that's just my only comment. And anybody can make a comment to me if I'm misguided in that by any ways.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Blatz. And I just throw my 2 cents into that comment. You know, you're saying shall encourage. It doesn't mean you must do. So you're just encouraging people. You're not, it's not saying you should have this in there. So I think shall is fine. That's my opinion. CEO Merritt, you had your hand up, and then Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I think you answered my comment. The word encouraged is more important than either shall or may in this case. So I don't think it matters which one you use. And I was just going to see if Craig, from a legislative point of view, had a different comment on it, but I agree with Councillor Ryan.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
So I do support the fact that we should take out G under item 7, general provisions, because sometimes graffiti is what a type of graffiti on a mural is what some people want. They want some vibrancy, not basically a heritage. And that type of pop artwork might be very attractive. So graffiti / artwork, I think, should be taken out of that provisions. And I think in reference to Uptown Olds, under general provisions, item 5, the Development Authority may require that the mural content be reflective of the town's heritage, history, or heritage. So that's where our heritage buildings could play a role in having a mural placed on one of those buildings too. So I think they've done a pretty good job, and I would support removing 7A and 7G.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. I agree with both of those, removing 7A and 7G. My comment about the street art is that in a community that I own a house in Calgary, all along the fencing that goes along a public street, and a fairly major busy one, They've done street art on every single fence, and it's beautiful as long as it's going to be maintained. But every single section of fence is a different art, and I don't know where they got the artists from, but it would be classified as street art, and I think it looks great. So there is an opportunity for greatness within that street art or graffiti area. Actually, I would like to hear from Councillor Bennett. I've not heard from Councillor Bennett on this.
Thank you. I am in agreement with this document. Street art, I'm still up in the air about that one. I don't know that we need to remove it, and I'm not quite sure about that one. But for the most of it, I do agree with.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I actually do have a question that has totally not been raised yet, and that is on item 10 of 310. Section is it here? I guess the whole thing is the very first line about maintaining the mural in a proper state of repair. Who will say whether or not that is in a proper state of repair or not? Would we be looking at having our art advisory committee making that determination, our bylaw officers, or who? I'm not exactly sure where we would put it in, and then how, or would we look at it on a regular basis? Like every annually, we would look at all the murals and say, okay, have somebody go around and look at them all. I'm not sure. So could somebody speak to that? CEO Merritt.
I believe our intent was that the bylaw enforcement would be dealing with this. It would be based on whether a piece of work was starting to fade or starting to peel, thing of that nature, and the bylaw enforcement officer would say that now it's becoming unsightly, as opposed to it's lost its artistic impression, so to speak.
Okay.
That's where I believe the intent was, and that's why it's stated that way.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Going back to 8 or to 7G, graffiti or street art, I think it's fine. I understand why everybody's requesting it be moved, but I think we need some clarification within this document or another document that designates what is acceptable or permitted graffiti, because we've just had a terrible rash of graffiti throughout town that's been very damaging to many, many people's properties. And I believe that we need to have, if we're going to remove that, we should be a little bit more clear on the definition of what we call permitted graffiti or permitted street art, and somewhere then say something within this documentation. That's just my own opinion.
Okay, thank you. We have Director Wagstaff and then Mayor Majewska and Councillor Harper.
So I had brought up bring it back up so I can read it. The community standards bylaw does have a definition of graffiti, and it centers around defacement or disfigurement, not the actual content of the graffiti, but whether or not it is damaging property. So that is clearly defined within that bylaw, and I think that would be utilized here to ensure that, you know, improper artwork that would be deemed graffiti because it is defacing or disfiguring of property would be prohibited. So the crux of that is, do you have permission? And if you don't have permission, then it's graffiti. If you do have permission, it needs to go through this process we're talking about today.
Great, thank you for that clarification, Director Wagstaff. Mayor Majewska.
My comment was going to be very much along that line. The other aspect to that is we've empowered the PAC to check and have these checks and balances of what should be acceptable in our town. And there's such a great cross section of people in our town that we should put the trust in there. So I'm still in support of removing G and allowing the PAC to do the job that we've empowered them to do.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councillor Harper, and then Director Wagstaff, you have another comment.
I was going to say that we do have the checks and balances in place for this, and perhaps we could just have remove the word graffiti under 7G, because if it's an approved art project under street art, it would be street art. So,
Correct. Thank you, Councillor Harper.
so
Yeah,
that would be a way to get around it.
I agree. I think graffiti is one thing. Street art is totally different than graffiti.
Yeah.
Thank you. CEO Merritt, you had a comment, and then Director Wagstaff. I don't know if you still need to. You're on mute, Mr. Merritt.
Sorry, both Director Wagstaff and Mayor Mazichka made my comment that by having it already in a process, if the packet basically approves graffiti or street art, we should remove this. They're actually approving artistic impressions.
Right.
That's the way I look at it. And so it should be removed in its entirety in my mind, because it's a restrictive thing. We're restricting art here.
Okay, thank you. Director Wagstaff, did you have?
Also wanted to reemphasize that not only does the PAAC, the Public Art Advisory Committee, have the members that are present on it from a cross section from our public, but it also has the ability to bring in other expertise that might be specific to the type of art that is being brought before them. So they can call in other expertise and other resources as well.
Yes, thank you. That's a very good point. All right, I think we've logged this along. Could we get a motion? Anybody, please? Thank you, Councilor Overwater.
Thank you. I hope I'll get this right. Okay, I move to accept for information and have administration bring back to a future regular council meeting with the amendments. Do you want me to say what the amendments are? Removing 3A, 3G.
I think on 3G, Councilor Overwater, I think on 3G, we were going to just remove graffiti and leave in street art.
Oh, well,
because graffiti is when you actually are putting art on a building that you don't even own. Or
yes, but I thought Mr. Merritt said remove the whole G.
Okay.
That's what I did say, because by putting that in place, they now have to interpret whether street art is what this is. And they're going to be basically, the PAC is going to be determining this is acceptable artwork that should be allowed in our town.
Okay, thank you.
So that's how I saw it.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Sorry.
Yeah. So the motion is for administration to bring back to a regular council as amended, removing 37A and 37G. Yeah, I think I captured it.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to call for the vote. Oh, sorry, CAO Merritt.
Can I just speak to it? I know Councilor Overwater indicated that a meeting could be called at any time of the PAC, but I would hate to think that it could be held up by the PAC too. So just by saying that it's the PAC, once they receive it from the development officer, should address this within a certain period of time. It just puts that certainty that they're going to deal with it. That's my thought. Maybe nobody else has it. That way we would have a 15 or 30-day period for them to address it.
Okay. Councilor Overwater, would you like to make an amendment to your?
Yeah, okay, so within a 15-day period, would that, Councilor Harper, you're on PAC with me, would you say that would be suitable time?
I would suggest that we should say within 30 days.
Okay, that sounds better.
It gives a lot of flexibility to the group.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, if I might, I take it the terms of reference for the PAC are already closed. So what I would suggest to accommodate that, it'd probably be a separate line after 2 to give guidance on what the expectation for that timeline is for the group. So they can look at the land use bylaw and see that we're expected to act within, I think you said 15 days?
30.
30, sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't have it in the terms of reference. Just saying.
Yeah. So it needs to be included within the bylaw. Or one way or the other. Okay, are we all clear now? All right, I'm gonna call for the Director Wagstaff, you guys.
For my own clarity, as we sort of format how the PAC is going to work, was that 30 days to decide and return, or 30 days to convene?
Decide and return.
Yeah,
So that it's not held up forever.
exactly. Yeah, that's how I saw it, is 30 days to basically decide and return it back to the development officers so they can move it on to MPC.
Great, that's how I looked at it too, thank you. We'll make sure that that's clear when it comes back to council.
One of the pieces between now and when it comes back to council that as administration that I think we'll go away and take a look at is on whether, 30 days or 45 days, just what's the turnaround that would be feasible, reasonable to be able to deliver on and be able to deliver on with, the quality that we're going to be expecting out of this group. So that's just the one piece I am just leaving with council that I am going to plan to take away and come back after we've had a chance to look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Wagstaff. I think we'll keep it at the 30 days at this point. It's in part of the motion. And we could always defeat the motion and go for 45, but I think we'll continue to keep it at the 30. Okay, now I'm gonna call the vote. All in favor? Okay, and the motion is carried. Thank you, 7-0.
And can I just thank Mr. Teal for his work on this and the rest of administration. I think we took up the comments of our public very well, and basically through the engagement process, we're able to come back with a change to this process.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Merritt. I was going to suggest thanking Craig Teal for all his work on this and the rest of administration who provided information for him to put it all together. Thank you. All right, now we're going to move along to new business. So item 7A, Council's annual schedule 2021. Mr. Merritt.
Okay, for the next number of items, I'm going to be asking Kelly Lloyd, our Coordinator of Strategic Affairs, to take us through those items, and then Director Linderman for the last few as well. So with that, Ms. Lloyd, can you speak to our standing items of council?
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Good afternoon, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor and Council. In front of you in this item is the standing item schedule for your agendas for the year 2021. The schedule has been adjusted to recent conversations and is here for your information to know when there's going to be presentations to assist you in your decision making.
Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. Is there any questions, Councillor Overwater? Oh, sorry, Council. Before we go to Councillor Overwater, CEO Mayor, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that our contacts with the two elected officials, one has confirmed February 8th, our MLA, Mr. Cooper, is going to be coming in 2% to council. We have not heard from our MP yet, or haven't been able to get a specific date from our MP at this point in time. And the two school boards have indicated that, well, one is still looking at the date probably in June, and the second one is looking at, the Catholic School Board is looking at the 16th or 17th of June, I believe, for possible dates, which would be in their school year calendar, so to speak. So the ones that we've sent letters out to, we've had mostly a reaction to. So I just wanted to give you an update on where we're at. And as we get more returns on information, we'll update council on that.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. So those would change from those two school boards would change from the July presentation to a June presentation. Is that what you're saying?
It appears that way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilor Overwater.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Yes, as I go through looking at who's coming, who's meeting with who, the Institute for Community and Regional Development coming in October. I guess my question to Councillor Bennett, is there an executive director or would that be changed to the chair coming to meet with the town? You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm not sure who will appear.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion to accept? Thank you, Councillor Harper.
Thank you very much. I move that council accepts for information the council standing items scheduled for 2021.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion? And that motion is carried 7-0. Let's move on to the next one, which is council strategic plan update.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor. Twice a year, we do an update on our strategic plan, the council strategic plan, and Ms. Lloyd has again put together all the changes since the last update, I believe last July, and so Ms. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Yes, attached for you is the most current version of the strategic plan for council. You'll notice there's now a check mark beside the MDP. So there have been a few data updates as far as dollars for some of the funding that council provides organizations. And it is pretty much a complete document. Council has accomplished quite a bit in their term. The next update for this would be in July.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Lloyd. Appreciate that. It's quite a complete document that when you read through it, you realize just how much we did accomplish within the last 3 years. And it's pretty amazing how much is on these lists. Is there any questions or comments from anyone? CEO Merritt?
Yeah, we hope to add murals to this list, and we hope to add the animal control as we'll be bringing that in March as part of the engagement package we did last fall. So there'll be a few updates to it. And the next time and the last time this will be updated, it will be the July PNP.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any comments or questions, concerns? All right, well, I'm going to point out 2 things that need to be updated, I suppose. And that would be on 6.3, page 84. The resolutions, I believe we had 2 resolutions to the AUMA. One was Council Over Waters, one on the organ donation, and the other one was on the emergency lights that we just had this fall. So that would be 2. And the addition also to 5.10 on page 83, which would be new sergeant position granted in 2021 for the RCMP. So those would be 2 additions that I would like to see made when we get presented later on.
Thank you for that. I have taken note of that. I actually have updates already in the next version that you don't see here. It's already a work in progress.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right. Can I entertain a motion, please? Mayor Majewski.
Just a quick comment before the motion. This document becomes obsolete with virtually every meeting we have. We accomplish something. So it's good to see, and thank you, Ms. Lloyd, for your continued work and direction within keeping all of council pulling in the same direction and adhering to our strategic plan. So it's with great pleasure I move that we accept the strategic plan's updates for information.
Thank you, Mayor Majewski. Council of Water.
Yeah, just a comment along Mayor Majewski's comments. Sometimes we forget all the good things that we have accomplished, and I think we need to start going forward, telling the public what we have accomplished, rather than sometimes we only focus on one or two, stumbling blocks that we're trying to deal with, rather than stating that, everything that we have accomplished, which, it is amazing when you look at that document. Thank you, Ms. Lloyd, for presenting that. And so I think we really need to pat ourselves on the back for what we have accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councilor Water. I agree 100%. I also would love to see this document go on to our website and show everybody what we've accomplished over the last 3 years. It's pretty amazing how much work we have done. Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All in favor? And that motion's carried 7-0. Thank you. We'll move on to item 7C, which is principles and policy and procedure development. CEO Merritt.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have made a tremendous attempt to get through all our policies, and now we're developing our procedural changes as well. And those things are not done in isolation. They're done based on principle and key areas that we basically focus on to make sure that our policies follow a pattern, so to speak. And with that, I really appreciate the work that Kelly Lloyd has done, and she can give us a few highlights to what goes into the principles of policy and procedural development.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. So bringing this item for council to understand that there, as Mr. Merritt indicated, that there are principles that we use to guide us in developing policies and procedures. And this is kind of funny telling you this now when the next item tells you all the policies you just completed in your review. So just a couple of highlights in the fact that there are reviews of procedures that are done and triggered by different pieces, such as legislative requirements, strategy changes, organizational changes, or if there is gaps in policies and or procedures. Now, the principles are pretty much the same when it comes to guiding both documents. And there are a few notes in there that outline why we present things the way we do. And it is sort of best practice of these principles to ensure the integrity of the decisions that council is making. So I'm not going to go through them all. You have them for your enjoyment and for reading pleasure. I just wanted to give this to council to give council an idea of what principles we use as staff moving forward in developing your policies and procedures.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Lloyd. Appreciate the providing you providing the information. It's always good to have this kind of detail in front of us. Are there any questions for Ms. Lloyd? Seeing none, sorry, you're getting in under the wire, Mr. Merritt. You probably have a comment and I can't hear it because you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Just want to highlight two things. While council is aware of the principles that we've used to get to here, as Ms. Lloyd had indicated, this was important to bring to the public to say that there are key aspects to developing a policy and a procedure. And on page 88, the fifth bullet from the bottom, this has already come up today when we brought the murals together. We do use the Interpretation Act, Craig does, so do we as officials, and the proper use of may, must, and shall. So it is well regarded and well thought through when we do use those specific terminologies.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree. Okay, so may I get a motion? Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. I move that we accept for information the principles and policy and procedure development. And going a little further to Mr. Merritt's, I think this would be a good tool to include next year with orientation with our newly elected officials when that transpires.
Very good point. Thank you, Councillor Blatz. All right, any other comments or questions, concerns? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All in favor? And that motion is carried 7-0. We'll move on to 7D then. Police advisory, policy advisory team.
Yes, it is the policy advisory team, and I want to thank both Kelly and Marcy and all those people that participate in this. This process has sped up our ability to get policies through in an effective way, and they've done a tremendous job to basically get almost every policy we had brought forth. And one of the things that may not show up readily is the consolidation of policies. In the past, we had a number of policies that were related, but we used them as individual. Kelly and Marcy and their team basically have been able to put these policies and consolidate a number of policies together. So while we may have fewer policies, we didn't lose any policies. We did a number of areas consolidate. So with that, I would like for Kelly to go through quickly the accomplishments of that team.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Yes, quickly. So council should be very proud of the endeavor that you undertook in your strategic plan, because you finished a policy review in your mandate. And by gosh, we're going to have procedures done in your mandate too. So we started with 91 that included administrative policies, and administrative policies were retired because a policy should be council's policy. And the procedure is what administration does with that policy. So we removed all of that and a little bit of confusion, I think. So at the end of the day, you approved 43, you repealed 61 that included the 18 retired ones that you didn't see because they were removed by ET. And you created 10 brand new policies. So congratulations, council. And with that, there's a policy list for your reading pleasure, and your requested binder policy or policy binder will be in your meeting room shortly.
Excellent. Thanks, Ms. Lloyd. And this is a tremendous amount of work from you and from your team, because council would never have been able to do this on their own. So thank you very much for all your work. Is there any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, can I entertain a motion, please? Councillor Thompson.
Yes, Your Worship. I would move that we accept for information the policy review report. And again, kudos to the group.
Thank you. All right. And since I had no questions or comments before, I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor? Thank you. It's carried 7-0. We'll move on to policy and procedure development. 7E.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor, and I'll hand this to Kelly to speak to that we do have a procedure in place to make sure that these are done in a very streamlined fashion, but it's not ad hoc when we approach all these changes, as I indicated before. So Kelly.
Thank you. And yes, I also wish to thank the policy advisory team and Marcy for all of their hard work in helping move this forward to achieve council's goal. So what's in front of you today and what our process is going to be is we have a process that's similar to policy review, and we do it with the procedure in tandem with the policy. At this particular point, what I call phase 2 is only looking at the procedure. And so in front of you is the first one to kick off everything. And it is the procedure on how to develop policy and procedure. So what will be given to you on a regular basis when we report will be the current policy. And then you will also be provided with the current procedure for your information.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. I mean, that would be very helpful to provide both of those things. I've always been interested in seeing when we did get the policies given to us that were going to be updated, and seeing the changes that were being made, and you highlighting them, that made it very clear to council what was being changed. So thank you for that. Is there any comments, questions, or concerns for Ms. Lloyd and Councillor Harper?
Thank you very much. I thank everybody for this good document, but I'd like to also state, and I've stated more than once, that I believe that when the procedures are presented to council as well, even though they're administrative to be done by, we direct administration to do the work. I believe that the procedure should also receive approval of council. Just my thoughts.
Okay.
I hate to, I seldom ever do disagree with council, but I do disagree on this. Policies are governance. This is how we govern, one of the tools of governing our town, and it should be coming, as Kelly indicated, from you. The procedures are the operations. There are how we are basically enact what you have given us to govern and to make sure we're doing it effectively. And I totally agree that we should be bringing both of them to you, but one for your approval, one for your information.
Thank you,
And
CEO.
it is outlined in the MGA, the difference, and I understand that sometimes it's a gray area. I see it more black and white when it comes to what our division of responsibilities are.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can I get a motion? Councillor Bennett, can I put you on the spot?
Sure. I move to accept for information and have administration bring back to a future regular council meeting.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, or concerns before we call a vote?
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, my question. Yeah, my question is, what are we bringing back?
Do we have nothing? Because I'm happy to amend or take an amendment. I thought we might have to bring this back.
At this particular time, not at this particular time, we are going to be starting another round of policy review once we start the new term.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Bennett, I would just say that we accept this information.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All in favor? And that motion is carried 7-0. Thank you. We'll move along to 7F, Municipal Measurement and Index. CEO Merritt.
Yes, thank you again, Deputy Mayor. And this will be a joint presentation very quickly by first Kelly Lloyd will give an overview of what the Municipal Measurement Index is all about. And then Director Linderman will go through some of the specific slides of how it looks in regards to other municipalities, so to speak. So this is for information, and I will ask Ms. Lloyd to start and then Director Linderman to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. So the Municipal Measurement Index, or MMI, was mandated for municipal affairs to prepare and release to the public. It is it's a tool that can be used to compare communities. Basically, this tool is a one-stop shop where measures that we already track and report to municipal affairs, such as audited financial statements, our financial information returns, our statistical information, election information, and Stats Canada data populates this tool. And in the future, the tool is going to be advanced to include municipal levels of service with some business indicators. So this is the first view of it with comparables. So it's nothing new. It's just been put into a new format that is accessible to all Albertans. And Sheena then will take you through the measurables that are in the graphs and what the MMI looks like and where Olds fits in that criteria.
Thank you. So first, I just want to go over the MMI. So this is a numerical value that Municipal Affairs has assigned to each municipality. This index is based on the relationship between population, equalized assessment, and the geographical area. The index allows for more meaningful comparisons across municipality as opposed to just population alone, as was done in the past. As a baseline, Municipal Affairs has said that municipalities that are within plus or minus 10 of each other are good comparables. When I ran that list, it was quite a long one for us. So to narrow it down, I've used plus or minus 2 to get the comparables that are in our agenda package today. So these we know are very close comparables to the town of Olds. So the great thing about this tool is that you can filter these comparables any way you like. The MMI index is just one method. If we were wanting to compare ourselves more locally, for example, we could filter out all the municipalities within Mountain View County or all of the municipalities along the Highway 2 corridor, just as examples. And so we would look to council for direction on what parameters you would like to see when creating our comparables. But as was mentioned, so today we're just using the MMI index and it is within plus or minus 2. So first up, we have our accumulated surplus. As you can see, Olds is on the low end here. This accumulated surplus is comparing our non-financial assets, which would be our equity in TCA, and our financial assets, which is our cash, receivables, and reserves. Moving on. Next is our composition of assessment. One thing to note in this one is this is our equalized assessment. So it is not necessarily our assessment that we would use. So just for comparison's sake, in 2021, we're looking at about a 75-25 split, whereas here it is showing 78-22. Equalized assessment is 2 years behind, as we all know. Moving on. Our long-term debt ratio, as you can see, Town of Olds was at 70%. This I do need to mention, so all of these comparables are at 2019. So this is prior to the op center debenture being taken out. If we were to look at this today, we would be at approximately, I don't even know, 98%, I want to say. Moving on. Our municipal debt per capita. So when we look at this, we're actually looking pretty good. Again, though this is 2019. One thing to note, Town of Bonnyville, 2019 was a very odd year for them. I did look into it a bit to see why their stats were so out of there and whether or not they should actually be a comparable with us. 2019 was an odd year for them. So moving forward, they are comparable, I feel. Next slide. Municipal tax levy, I actually looked into this one a little bit more just to get some more information. So right now it is set at $500,000. So this is the average municipal portion of taxes that a person with a $500,000 home would pay. Now I know that I can go in and change it to what our average assessment is and for future comparables. And then we just get into our tax rates. As you can see, non-residential Olds is one of the lowest. It actually is tied for the lowest in the non-residential. And then moving down to residential, again, we are one of the lowest. For residential, for this particular one, Town of Banff, you can't really compare to because their tax structure is so different. And then moving down to revenue and expenses per capita again. Again, we are looking good in comparison to everyone. And I would entertain any questions.
Thank you, Director Lindeman. That's interesting to look at these graphs. Mayor Majewska.
Thank you very much. At the beginning and throughout, you were talking about comparables plus or minus 10 and plus or minus 2. Is that 10,000 people and 2,000 people? what were you referring to?
No, so the municipal index is just a point system technically, I guess, based on those three things. And our point value is 79. And so municipal affairs says within plus or minus 10 of that is a comparable. I went down to plus or minus 2 of 79.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Thank you very much. Through you to Director Linderman. Is it possible to have more indicators like water, wastewater rates as part of this municipal indicators or not? Or they don't collect that type of information?
No, they don't collect that information. It's more tax-based.
Okay. And are you able to just compare municipalities to the town of Olds within our region as well?
Yep, I can choose any municipality we want as a comparable. So like then we can choose just within Mountain View County, or if we want to go up and down the Highway 2 corridor, however you want to slice it.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how we compare within our communities within our region as well.
Thank you, CEO Merritt.
Yeah, and if we do that, Sheena, can we do what the differential is? As you said, we're doing plus minus 2. This could give us a range of plus minus, say, 30 or something like something of that nature, just to show that why it may not be comparable to use the Mountain View County municipalities because of the size of the Olds and other factors. But I think it would be good to do that and just show what the points would be.
Yeah, and if Sean can just bring up that one of the graphs again, I'll just show you. There's that green box you can see. Just anyone, yeah, the green box. And so that would tell us which municipalities are good comparators, fair or poor. So whatever I choose, we'll be able to see right there how they fit in with the mix.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No, well, I just have one question for you, Director Lindeman, and that would be when you choose which communities we're going to, or other municipalities we're going to be compared with, does that lock us into something on somebody's website, or is it just for our information only?
Yeah, it's just purely for our information.
Okay, great. It would be nice to see then for us, as Councillor Harper mentioned, to compare with other communities and municipalities up and down the Highway 2 between Red Deer and Calgary, and of course taking out Airdrie because they're so much bigger, but or within the area that Member Zizka is sitting with on that mayor's board, so that it extends to that particular group, and we would have information that would be able to provide that mayor's caucus at some point.
Definitely.
Okay. Anybody with any questions? Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion, please. Ma'am Zizka.
Thank you very much. I move that we accept the Municipal Measurement Index, MMI, information for information.
Thank you, and I'll call a vote on that. All in favor? And that motion is carried 7-0. We'll move on to item 7G, which is the most grant update.
I'm just going to hand this to Director Lindeman to give you a very quick update as she has done in her document.
Thank you. So as you all know, at the end of 2020, we received $934,963. This was through the Government of Alberta in conjunction with the Government of Canada. And so year to date, this is 2020 year to date. Actually, I should go back. So these funds need to be used by March 31st of 2021, or we will have to return them. Looking through some preliminary numbers, so we haven't gone through year end yet, but it is looking like we will be able to allocate all of these costs throughout 2020. And so the breakdown of that is we've seen decreased revenues of nearly $600,000, increased staffing and overtime costs of $56,000, distribution of funds to others. So this includes our business license waiver, and the business reopening grant was $111,000. And then direct COVID-19 expenses of $186,000. So that was just a quick breakdown. If you have any questions, I would be open to that now.
Oh, thank you very much, Director Lindeman. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns from any member of council? Nope. CEO Merritt?
It's very fortunate that the province came up with this program to offset some of our costs in regards to COVID-related items, and appreciate that this is not the final tally, as we have another quarter to have expenses, but we have basically ran out of funds for it, so we'll be able to claim all this. But I do appreciate the both the government of Alberta and government of Canada to recognize the municipalities would have operational costs associated with COVID and allow us to cover much of those, not all of them.
Yes, thank you, Steve. I agree. I mean, it's good that they provided some funding, because we would be in a big shortfall. Mayor Majewska.
Actually, yes, just a quick comment before I offer a motion. It's actually frightening how closely this program was designed and hit the nail on the head, considering that COVID was something brand new. So kudos to the Alberta government for designing the MOST program and partnering with the federal government and getting it, like I said, frighteningly close to the actual amount of money that we needed to cover those shortfalls.
Yeah. Great. Yep, exactly. Thank you.
Comment or question, I'll offer a motion as well.
I'll check. Anybody else with any questions or comments? Nope, seeing none, go ahead. Thank you, Mayor Majewska.
I'd like to thank Director Linderman for all her work with regards to this, and except for information, the MOST grant update.
Oh, thank you very much. And I'll call a question as to vote. Don't know what I'm saying. All in favor? Long day. And that's carried 7-0. Thank you. All right, we'll go on to item 7H, which is the development permit fees.
Yes, 7H, council has directed us to look into what the cost would be of waiving development fees. So Director Lindeman has provided an update to what those costs could be. And as you can see in the council direction, this is either for information or to get further direction from council, whether we should be looking at coming back to council, a regular council meeting with a potential reduction. Director Lindeman, can you speak further to this and give the numbers and such?
Sure. So as is in your agenda package, the potential costs or impact to our budget would be approximately $40,000. That is our 2021 budget for this line item. As I mentioned in here, in 2019, we received $48,000 in revenue, and in 2020, $21,000. So it does vary widely, and obviously during this COVID time, I would say we would be closer to the 2020 dollar value, but just to go with the $40,000 budget impact would be safe.
Thank you, Director Lindeman. Is there any comments, questions, concerns for Director Lindeman on this item? Councillor Harper.
At this point, I would accept this for information only. I know that Deputy Mayor Ryan had indicated that other municipalities had looked at possibly waiving development fees, but I think there's a lot of checks and balances by placing fees on development, and I think it's important that we have those checks and balances there.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Any other comments? Mayor Bajewski, you were shaking your head? Yes or no? Okay. Councillor Bennett.
I'm in agreement with Councillor Harper on that as well.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to add my 2 cents here. I actually think there are communities who have done this, have waived the fees. I would like to see it go for the first half of the year and then reevaluate to see whether or not it would need to be continued. COVID is here with us for the next little while, and it would be a benefit to another benefit to businesses, but not only in the waiver of fees, but in drawing perhaps new business to town because of the fees not being there. So it would be an economic development impact. Councillor Overwater.
Thank you, Deputy, I was going to say Deputy Reeve. Good heavens, Deputy
Oh,
Mayor.
no.
Thank you to Councillor Harper. Now, just because you would waive the fee doesn't mean you would waive the checks and balances. You would still have checks and balances going out there and making sure that things are where they're supposed to be. I mean, it's just a comment, but you know, just because you waive the fee doesn't mean you would waive the checks and balances.
Yes, thank you for that comment. Councillor Harper.
So as part of the schedule that we received, for example, for a deposit on a building, and you're proposing that we waive the deposits to ensure that buildings are built the way they say they're supposed to, would be $5,000 on a R1 house. And that's a deposit that people get back. So I'm just saying, are you waiving all of those fees, or are you going to pick and choose? If you're going to pick and choose, then let's pick and choose. But I would prefer to say, let's accept this for information. And, you know, we know that building, you know, is taking place. The biggest stumbling block right now for construction is the cost of the material, not the development fees for the town of Olds.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Councillor Thompson.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I'd be willing to go through it and consider it further. I don't think there's anything that would preclude us from doing that. I think it is an incentive that we can offer, and yeah, I'd be willing to have this come back to council so we could discuss it further.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else have a comment or a question? Director Lindeman.
I just wanted to mention, so the cost that was provided, the 40,000, does not include the development security. I would recommend that we keep that in place. And as Councillor Harper said, that is returned to the developer after things are complete. But
Yes, thank you. I was going to say that I don't agree that that's a fee. It's more like a deposit and a returnable. So there's a bit of a difference in that. Okay, would anybody like to make a motion? Councillor Overwater.
Sure, I can make a motion. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ryan. Yes, I move that we accept for information and direct administration to bring back to a future regular council meeting for further discussion on what fees would be waived.
Thank you for that. We have a motion on the floor. Any further comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, and opposed? All right, that passes 6-1. Thank you, everybody. So that is the end of our regular agenda. We now have a closed session. And under, I have to read all this off. When council goes into a closed session meeting, attendees have two options for continued participation in the virtual council meeting. You may click on the leave button, leave meeting button, and leave the meeting, and then watch our Town of Olds website or Facebook pages for live updates as to when council will return. Administration will post when the meeting will reconvene, and the meeting attendees are able to rejoin the virtual meeting at that time. Or you may stay on the line in the virtual meeting platform, and administration will move all meeting attendees into the meeting waiting room while council is in their closed session. Once council has returned, all meeting attendees in the waiting room will be brought back into the open forum. So what I'm going to do right now is ask for a motion to go into closed session, and who will be staying for that. Councillor Harper.
Yes, I move that council goes to closed session under FOIP section 17, disclosure harmful to personal privacy. I would say that Director Chant, Director Wagstaff, and of course our CAO would be staying in the session. And of course, Director Linderman and Director Andrew.
Okay, thank you very much. All in favor of going into a closed session? And that motion is carried. So thank you. Mr. Fox, could you let everybody out? And
I am doing it now.
thank you.
Counselor Bennett, how come there's two of you on there?
Yeah, I was going to ask that too.
Because you're special?
Okay, before we start,
Councillor
Mr.
Bennett,
Fox.
are they both you? They are both you? Yes, okay, okay.
We have two computers going.
Another Town of Olds.
Are we clear, Mr. Fox?
I believe so. I'm not sure which Director Wagstaff is referring to.
I don't.
Was that just a Town of Olds logo?
The Town of Olds logo is you.
Yes. Twice, because I got my video and I got my.
Oh, okay, so you need me to admit you again.
Please.
You?
There we go. You're connecting me. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Now that you have double lots of things.
There we go.
Okay.
You're good to go.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I'd like to entertain a motion for a reconvening of this public session. Thank you. Or do we need to do that? I don't know. I have it on my list that we have to, but maybe we don't. All right, we're back in public session, and there's no rise in reports, so I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Thank you, Councilor Overwater. Thank you, everybody. Nice long meeting.
Thanks, Heather. You did a good job.
Thank you.
Good job, Heather.
Thanks, guys. Take care. See you.